And we're live. I'm no longer late, I'm now early. So if you're watching this not live, please look below and there'll be a chapter marker when I actually start the book. We're just going to hang out for about 10 minutes. Look below. We're going to let people filter in. That's usually what happens. Hang out for about 10 minutes. I got to mute that. I got the thing playing, make sure it works out. Oh, Blue Frost, what's up? How you doing? Good to see you in here. So yes, if you're not watching this live, look at the little chapters below. I will tell you when to start, when the book reading actually starts. We're going to be listening to an audiobook on here. What's up, Meta? Good to see you, brother, here on YouTube. And everybody check out Meta Prime on YouTube as well. I'm sorry, Meta Prime on that other one, Twitter, the other thing. Yeah. Oh, 7. It was like at 2. I'm like, that never happens. What the heck's going on? What is up, Paul? Good to see you. So yeah, this is part 3, right? So I've done 2 of these already. We're gonna begin where we left off. Book's really weird. Book's interesting. I'm giving my comments where I can. A lot of it is like we were going through a big section where I was just like, this is BS, this is BS, this is BS. But it's cool to hear how they thought back then. How this guy thought, I guess. It's not like it's indicative of what everybody thought, but it's something. You'll also notice that behind me is I've moved my Mayan blanket, throw, whatever you want to call it, behind me, and that's because of a guy, a Catholic priest. I'll just pull that up. Actually, I'm not doing it yet. I'm trying to find a good charity, but the next live stream I do will be in honor of him and raising some money for him. So this is Father Marcelo Perez, and he was martyred this week. He was an indigenous activist and for farm workers as well. This is him right here. He was I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Tzotzil Maya in the southern Mexico, Chiapas. And he, we're not going to talk about who did it or whatever. It's not about that. It's about honoring him. So we're not going to do that today because I need to have time to figure out how to best put money towards whatever cause that's relevant to him. So I'm going to do a little research. I've reached out to a Jesuit priest in Mexico, and hopefully he gets back to me. And then next time we do a live stream, actually the next live stream will be tonight at 10 p.m. And that'll be with debunking. But the next time I live stream on likely this book, or the next, maybe I'll do something else on the next live stream if I come up with an idea or some episode comes out. We'll do it then. So we're not going to be raising money for that tonight, but that is something I'm going to be doing very soon here once I find a good way to get the money. Yes, welcome my friends Shaman, Blue Frost, my Turkish friend. I need to just figure out how to pronounce your name, man. I hate just calling you my Turkish friend. It's all right. Welcome, Cause 1973. Good to see you. It looks like you've got a Candy Skull profile picture, very, very relevant to what I'm talking about today. So if you're just joining us, we'll start the reading. Part 3, part 1 and 2 are on the profile on my YouTube. So we're just gonna begin where we left off. It's an audiobook, so it's gonna play itself. I've been having a lot of fun as well. It's a free audiobook from LibriVox, which is very nice of them to provide these free audiobooks done by volunteers. And some of the voices are pretty different. It's fun to hear the different ones. Some of them are better than others. 0. That works. I'm eventually, I will. I'm not going to do it right now. I got a lot of stuff to handle doing this, but I will just figure out how to pronounce it. How dare, I'm just going to take the father off the screen, off the priest off the screen while I'm talking about this. But how dare I expose Flint Dibble for lying? He's the victim in this situation. He's the authority here, and you should have never questioned, you conspiracy theorists. Yes, that's me. Known conspiracy theorist, illegitimate scholar who is an alternative archaeologist, a pseudo-archaeologist who read scholarly maritime archaeology. How dare I read maritime archaeology papers? I wonder what voices await us. Me too. It's honestly the thing I'm most looking forward to. So I'm going to start this soon. As always, please let me know if the audio quality is not perfect. I'm going to have it's easier for me to tell when I'm using my Procaster, which is my normal audio interface. I did bring it back to Connecticut. I'm going to be going back to Pennsylvania soon, probably tomorrow, and headed to the airport. Yes. So I'm going to be around for a few hours. I'll probably stop 30 minutes before 10 p.m. Eastern, which is when I'm going to do the dunking stream. He'll be coming on, joining us to discuss some stuff. And after that, I might come back to it. Probably not. Yes. What's up, Fabian? Good to see you, brother. Yeah. So just a couple more minutes. Let people join, and then we'll get this started. Shaman, you want to tell us where you're going? Obviously, no need to tell us, but if you want to. Also, please like the video. I would appreciate it. Like it or don't. I'm not your dad, but if you want to, go right ahead. Actually, I'm just going to test the audio right now. Let me know how this feels. Am I a sports fan? Yes. I don't watch sports as much anymore, but I would say number 1, football, number 2, soccer, number 3, hockey. Dallas visiting your girlfriend back to Alabama. Fantastic. I love Gulf Shores, Alabama, one of my favorite places in the world. Very much more Florida culturally than it is Alabama, but still. Love that. But yes, I'm an Eagles fan for NFL football, for soccer, New England Revolution, Celtic FC in the Scottish Premiership, and got to be partial to Leeds United in the Premiership as well, because that's the Orange Beach. That's close by. Fantastic. Leeds United is like, they got a bunch of, well, maybe they don't anymore. I haven't been following it as much recently, but they used to have a bunch of American players. And oh my gosh, I have several jerseys in my closet. Sheffield United is my team. They moved between the Championship, which is the second tier, and the Premier League. Marine's true PhDs for sport. Sad Flint noises. Fantastic. Yeah. So sports, soccer, we'll say, Sheffield United, Celtic FC, got to rep Celtic. And, Man U, says the girlfriend. Yeah. Very common for Man U. I love Sheffield United. What other teams for football? Eagles, big Eagles fan, big Eagles fan. Sheffield United, Celtic FC, New England Revolution in those 3 different leagues. For hockey, it's the Bruins, New England, Boston Bruins. Unfortunately, Connecticut, we lost our one professional sports team. We actually have women's professional basketball here. Henrik Larsson before. Absolutely. I know the name. That's fantastic. I look exactly. Oh, from Scotland. Fantastic. I actually did a study abroad in Scotland at the University of Edinburgh. I loved it, but yes, I look like your brother. Fantastic. I'm majority of my blood is Irish. The Bruins. Thank God I'm not a Rangers fan. Are you also Scottish? I actually, I was talking to a Scottish guy earlier, and he had a Rangers profile picture, and I sent him a picture of me in a Celtic jersey. Of course, it's all love, man. You know, the violence has been over for 40 years. And I'm Irish descended, but I'm American. So it's glad the violence is over, mostly, and hopefully will continue to be over. God willing. Into shooting sports? What do you mean shooting sports? Down in Chile. So we're going to start in a minute or two here. Let me test this audio. Let me know how the audio is on the video compared to my own audio.
Its islands. At Isle Royale, vast works were found, reaching to a depth of 6.
What do you think? How we doing? How's it feel? IPSC shooter. Fabian, I have no idea what you're talking about. Irish taking over the world. That's funny. So yeah, Meta is referring to something in Northern Europe. In Northern Europe, the Irish have the lowest IQs of anybody. It's not that much lower. It's like 95, but it is lower. Respect the Bruins and the Flyers. Philadelphia Flyers is number 2. My teams are New England and Philadelphia. Thank God I'm not a Rangers fan. Do I think there's a possibility? A possibility? Yes. I do think there's a possibility, but that's it. It's a possibility. I want to be very clear. I say this all the time, but people still accuse me just because I talked about maritime archaeology. It's I feel the same way Graham does. He probably believes it a little bit more, but Graham is very clear that it's a hypothesis. He's not talking about it as a fact, which makes people very angry when they try to disprove him. Oh, but how's my audio? Let me know.
Gigantic scale,
Can you
not
hear it?
only along the shores of the lake, but even far out upon its islands. At Isle Royale, vast works were found, reaching to a depth of 60 feet. Great.
How is it? Is tobacco good for you? No, it's not good for you. Well, it's bad and good. It's it's trade-offs. Everything in life is trade-offs. Northwest Alabama, fantastic. Audio's great. Good to hear, Cause. Do we have 2 Scottish guys in here? Both of them Celtics fans from Glasgow? Or sorry, not Celtics. That is a basketball team from New England, my home area. Celtic, just Celtic. Right, and we've talked about this before. O'Higgins. We've talked about this before, one of the founders of Chile. And I think there was a Scottish guy down in Venezuela as well I was learning about recently. Really weird guy. As well as the father of the American Navy, John Paul Jones. Incredible guy. Yeah, I'd love to hear where everybody's from as well. I usually do that. Nicotine is effective at purging spike proteins from your body. Yeah, I know there's some benefits. There's plenty of benefits to nicotine. Also, Zins, which I have in right now, it's not tobacco. It's just nicotine. It's concentrated nicotine. Yes, and this is something that Graham Hancock brings up. We've had the same brains. We have been anatomically modern for at least 300,000 years. That's the most recent anatomically modern human found. So I am going to, we're going to start. I got to mark it down. Oh, and Patreon's $2 a month. Link is down below. If you'd like to follow along, the link to the book is down below. I'm going to be playing the audio while having the book, the text up top so that we can follow along. Book start, what? I got to get the time. 12, okay, so 12:30, we're going to start the book. Oh, okay, here we go.
Only along the shores of the lake, but even far out upon its islands. At Isle Royale, vast works were found, reaching to a depth of 60 feet. Great intelligence was shown in following up the richest veins, even when interrupted. The excavations were drained by underground drains. On 3 sections of land on this island, the amount of mining exceeded that mined in 20 years in one of our largest mines, with a numerous force constantly employed.
Whoa.
In one place, the excavations extended in a nearly continuous line for 2 miles. No remains of the dead and no mounds are found near these mines. It would seem, therefore, that the miners came from a distance and carried their dead back with them. Henry Gilman, Smithsonian Rep. 1873, page 387, supposes that the curious so-called garden beds of Michigan were the fields from which they drew their supplies of food. He adds, "The discoveries in Isle Royale throw a new light on the character of the mound builders, giving us a totally distinct conception of them, and dignifying them with something of the prowess and spirit of adventure which we associate with the higher races. The copper, the result of their mining, to be available must, in all probability, have been conveyed in vessels, great or small, across a treacherous and stormy sea, whose dangers are formidable to us now, being dreaded even by our largest craft, and often proving their destruction. Leaving their homes, those men dared to face the unknown, to brave the hardships and perils of the deep and of the wilderness, actuated by an ambition which we today would not be ashamed to acknowledge. Such vast works in so remote a land must have been inspired by the commercial necessities of some great civilization. And why not by that ancient and mighty people who covered Europe, Asia, and Africa with their manufactures of bronze, and who possessed, as Plato tells us, enormous fleets trading to all parts of the inhabited world, whose cities roared with the continual tumult of traffic, whose dominion extended to Italy and Egypt, and who held parts of the great opposite continent of America under their control? A continuous waterway led from the island of Atlantis to the Gulf of Mexico, and thence up the Mississippi River and its tributaries almost to these very mines of Lake Superior. Arthur Mitchell says, "The Past in the Present," page 132, "the discovery of bronze and the knowledge of how to
Oh
make
my
it
gosh. Okay, who was here last time? This is the guy who does these crazy weird voices when he's doing somebody else. Oh, I don't know if he's kidding or not.
as a
Okay.
mere intellectual effort be regarded as rather above than below the effort which is involved in the discovery
Also, please, how is my audio versus the audio of the video? Is it about even?
and use of iron. As regards bronze, there is first the discovery of copper and the way of getting it from its ore, then the discovery of tin and the way to get it from its ore, and then the further discovery that, by an admixture of tin with copper in proper proportions, an alloy with the qualities of a hard metal can be produced. It is surely no mistake to say that there goes quite as much thinking to this as to the getting of iron from its ore, and the conversion of that iron into steel. There is a considerable leap from stone to bronze, but the leap from bronze to iron is comparatively small. It seems highly improbable, if not altogether absurd, that the human mind, at some particular stage of its development, should here, there, and everywhere, independently, and as the result of reaching that stage, discover that an alloy of copper and tin yields a hard metal useful in the manufacture of tools and weapons. There is nothing analogous to such an occurrence in the known history of human progress. It is infinitely more probable that bronze was discovered in one or more centers by one or more men, and that its
What possessed him to do this? Come on.
first use was solely in such center or centers, that the invention should then be perfected and its various applications found out, and that it should thereafter spread more or less broadly over the face of the earth, is a thing easily understood. We will find the knowledge
He
of
does sound a
bronze
bit like
wherever
RFK.
the colonies of Atlantis extend, and nowhere else. And Plato tells us that the people of Atlantis possessed and used that metal. The indications are
Okay, what's funny is that his normal voice sounded robotic before, but now that it's like compared to what he just did, it sounds so much better to me.
that the Bronze Age represented the coming in of a new people, a civilized people. With that era, it is believed, appears in Europe for the first time the domesticated animals, the horse, the ox, the sheep, the goat, and the hog. Morlot, Smithsonian Rep, 1860, page 311. It was a small race with very small hands. This
I
is
guess he means
shown
physically
in the
small.
size of the sword hilts. They are not large enough to be used by the present races of Europe. They were a race with long skulls, as contradistinguished from the round heads of the Stone Period. The drawings on the following page represent the types of the two races. Skulls of the Age of Stone, Denmark.
Two races?
This people must
two
have sent
races
out
there.
colonies to the shores of France, Spain, Italy, Ireland, Denmark, and
Oh,
Norway,
long skulls.
who
He
bore
did
with
just say
them
long
the
skulls.
arts
I'm sorry. He said long skulls, and that is something that's notable.
Denmark. This people must have sent out drawings on the following page represent the types of the two races. Skulls of the Age of
Types of the two races. I haven't read it personally. Anyone else? Okay, so this is interesting.
Stone, Denmark. This people must have sent out colonies to the shores of France, Spain, Italy, Ireland, Denmark, and Norway, who bore with them the arts and implements of civilized life. They raised crops of grain, as is proved by the bronze sickles found in different parts of Europe. It is not even certain that their explorations did not reach to Iceland. Says Humboldt, When the Northmen first landed in Iceland, A.D. 875, although the country was uninhabited, they found there Irish books, mass
Did
bells, and other objects which had been left behind by earlier visitors,
I'm
called the papar.
taking like
These
marks
papai,
down
fathers, were the clerici
to
of Daikul.
to
If
look
then,
these
as
things
we
up
may
later.
suppose from the testimony here referred to, these objects belonged to Irish monks, papar, who had come from the Faroe Islands, why should they have been termed in the native sagas Westmen, Vestmen, who had come over the sea from the westward? Kommer til Vesten Haf? Humboldt's Cosmos, Volume 2, page 238. If they came from the west, they could not have come from Ireland, and as the Scandinavians may easily have mistaken Atlantean books and bells for Irish books and mass bells. They do not say that there were any.
I'm sorry, guys. So I lost my monetization and then I put it back. So it might be a little messy. No need to donate if you don't want to, but can someone tell me if you have the ability to donate? If you have the little marker thing, I just want to know if that's possible right now. Because if not, I need to like figure that out, why that's not happening. Because I don't see it. But yeah, continue. But someone please tell me if you have the ability. No need to do it unless you want to. I'm just happy you're here. No marker. That's so weird. I'm going to figure that out. But
Any evidences that these relics belonged to a people who had recently visited the island, and as they found the island uninhabited, it would be impossible for them to tell how many years or centuries had elapsed since the books and bells were left there. The fact that the implements of the Bronze Age came from some common center and did not originate independently.
Also, tell me if an ad plays for you if you don't have YouTube Premium, because it shouldn't. But if it does, I want to know so I can figure out to turn that off, because I want to have donations enabled and ads disabled, and it's all messed up now.
In different countries is proved by the striking similarity which exists between the bronze implements of the region as widely separated as Switzerland, Ireland, Denmark, and Africa. It is not to be supposed that any overland communication existed in that early age between these countries, and the coincidence of design which we find to exist can only be accounted for by the fact that the articles of bronze were obtained from some sea-going people who carried on a commerce at the same time with all those regions. Celts. Compare, for instance, these two decorated bronze celts, the first from Ireland, the second from Denmark, and then compare both these with a stone celt found in a mound in Tennessee, given below. Here we have the same form precisely. Leaf-shaped bronze swords. Compare the bronze swords in the four preceding illustrations from Ireland, Sweden, Switzerland, and Denmark, and then observe the same very peculiar shape, the leaf shape, as it is called, in the stone sword from Big Harpeth River, Tennessee.
Thank you. I was on, sorry for another interjection, but I was on Nephilim Death Squad today. You can find that episode on their Patreon. And then soon it will also be on my Patreon in full. Please like the video. Patreon in the link below, $2 a month at a minimum. Thank you for my patrons. Blue Frost at $20 a month. Very, very generous. Totally unnecessary, but very generous, and I appreciate it. Let's continue.
We'll find as we proceed that the Phoenicians were unquestionably identified with Atlantis, and that it was probably from Atlantis they derived their god Baal or Bel or El, whose name crops out in the Bel
Baal
of the
is from
Babylonians,
Atlantis?
the
That's not
Elohim
good.
and the Beelzebub of the Jews, and the Allah of the Arabs.
What?
And we find that this great deity, whose worship extended so widely
anyone else
among the
horrified by that?
Mediterranean races, was known and adored
Obviously,
also
it's just a
upon
claim,
the
but
northern and western coasts of Europe. Professor Nilsson finds traces of Baal worship in Scandinavia. He tells us that the festival of Baal or Balder was celebrated on Midsummer's Night in Scania and far up into Norway, almost to the Lofoten Islands, until within the last 50 years. The feast of Baal or Beltane was celebrated in Ireland to a late period. I argue from these facts not that the worship of Baal came to Ireland and Norway from Assyria or Arabia, but that the same great parent race which carried the knowledge of Baal to the Mediterranean brought it also to the western.
Is that true? Epstein's submarine was called Atlantis. Is that true? I'm going to look that up in another tab. That is insane.
Coasts of Europe. And with the adoration of Baal, they imported also the implements of bronze now found in such abundance in those regions. The same similarity of form exists in the bronze knives from Denmark and Switzerland, as represented in the illustrations on page 254. In the central figure we have a representation of an Egyptian-looking man holding a cup before him. We shall see as we proceed that the magnetic needle, or mariner's compass, dates back to the days of Hercules, and that it consisted of a bar of magnetized iron floating upon a piece of wood in a cup. It is possible that in this ancient relic of the Bronze Age we have a representation of the magnetic cup. The magnetic needle must certainly have been an object of great interest to a people who, through its agency, were able to carry on commerce on all the shores of Europe from the Mediterranean to the Baltic. The second knife represented above has upon its handle a wheel, or cross surrounded by a ring, which, we shall see hereafter, was preeminently the symbol of Atlantis. If we are satisfied that these implements of bronze were the work of the artisans of Atlantis, or the antediluvians, they must acquire additional and extraordinary...
This is the craziest book I've ever read, listened to, whatever. This is insane. Yeah, I mean, they probably did, but I haven't harassed them. So, like, I don't know. Whatever, dude. I don't care. I haven't done anything. I haven't slandered anybody. I just haven't. Nobody has.
Extraordinary interest in our eyes, and we turn to them to learn something of the habits and customs of that great, original, broad-eyed, sunken race. We find among the relics of the Bronze Age an urn, which probably gives us some idea of the houses of the Atlanteans. It is evidently made to represent a house, and shows us even the rude fashion in which they fastened their doors. The Mandan Indian built round houses very much of this appearance. The museum at Munich contains a very interesting piece of pottery, which is supposed to represent one of the lake villages or hamlets of the era when the people of Switzerland dwelt in houses erected on piles driven into the bottom of the lakes of that country. The accompanying illustration represents it. The double spiral ornament upon it shows that it belongs to the Bronze Age. Among the curious relics of the Bronze Age are a number of razor-like knives, from which we may conclude that the habit of shaving the whole or some part of the face or head dates back to a great antiquity. The illustration below represents them. These knives were found in Denmark. The figures upon them represent ships, and it is not impossible that their curious appendages may have been a primitive kind of sails. Bronze razor knives. An examination of the second of these bronze knives reveals a singular feature. Upon the handle of the razor there are 10 series of lines. The stars in the sky are 10 in number, and there are probably 10 rings at the left-hand side of the figure, 2 being obliterated. There were, we are told, 10 sub-kingdoms in Atlantis, and precisely as the 13 stripes on the American flag symbolize the 13 original states of the Union, so the recurrence of the figure 10 in the emblems upon this bronze implement may have reference to the 10 subdivisions of Atlantis. The large object in the middle of this ship may be intended to represent a palm tree, the symbol, as we shall see in America, of Aztlan or Atlantis. We have but to compare the pictures of the ships upon these ancient razor knives with the accompanying representations of a Roman galley and a ship of William the Conqueror's time to see that there can be no question that they represented the galleys of that remote age. They are doubtless faithful portraits of the great vessels which Plato described as filling the harbors of Atlantis. Ship of William the Conqueror. We give, on page 258, a representation of a bronze dagger found in Ireland, a strongly made weapon. The cut below it represents the only implement of the Bronze Age yet found containing an inscription. It has been impossible to decipher it, or even to tell to what group of languages its alphabet belongs. It is proper to note, in connection with the discussion of the Bronze Age, that our word bronze is derived from the Basque or Iberian broncea, from which the Spanish derive bronce and the Italians bronzo. The copper mines of the Basques were extensively worked at a very early age of the world, either by the people of
Basques
Atlantis or
are,
by the
by
Basques.
the way, the Basques are a seafaring people. I saw that we had a Puerto Rican in here. Mentioned that a lot of Puerto Ricans have Basque blood, some or a lot of Basque blood in them, because there were a lot of the people who settled the Americas in Latin America.
Themselves a colony from Atlantis. The probabilities are that the name for bronze, as well as the metal itself, dates back to Plato's island. I give some illustrations on pages 239 and 242 of ornaments and implements of the Bronze Age, which may serve to throw light upon the habits of the ancient people. It will be seen that they had reached a considerable degree of civilization, that they raised crops of grain and cut them with sickles, that their women ornamented themselves with bracelets, armlets, earrings, finger rings,
Okay.
hairpins, and amulets.
Okay, someone just told me they got an ad, which they should not have gotten. As I put the ads on the non-live, but they should. I'll mess with the settings. I'm sorry if you got an ad. If anybody else gets an ad, like after about like 5 minutes, because it's going to take me a while to screw with it, please let me know, because you shouldn't.
Amulets, that their mechanics used hammers, adzes, and chisels, and that they possessed very fair specimens of pottery. Sir John Lubbock argues, Prehistoric Times, pages 14, 16, etc., a new civilization is indicated not only by the mere presence of bronze, but by the beauty and variety of the articles made from it. We find not only, as before, during the Stone Age, axes, arrows, and knives, but, in addition, swords, lances, sickles, fish hooks, earrings, bracelets, pins, rings, and a variety of other articles. If the bronze implements of Europe had been derived from the Phoenicians, Greeks, Etruscans, or Romans, the nearer we approach the site of those nations, the greater should be the number of bronze weapons we would find, but the reverse is the case. Sir John Lubbock, Prehistoric Times, page 20, shows that more than 350 bronze swords have been found in Denmark, and that the Dublin Museum contains 1,283 bronze weapons found in Ireland, while, he says, I have only been able to hear of 6 bronze swords in all Italy. This state of things is inexplicable unless we suppose that Ireland and Denmark received their bronze implements directly from some maritime nation whose site was practically as near their shores as it was to the shores of the Mediterranean. We have but to look at our map on page 43 to see that Atlantis was considerably nearer to Ireland than it was to Italy. The striking resemblance between the bronze implements found in the different portions of Europe is another proof that they were derived from one and the same source, from some great mercantile people who carried on their commerce at the same time with Denmark, Norway, Ireland, Spain, Greece, Italy, Egypt, Switzerland, and Hungary. Mr. Wright, Essays on Archaeology, page 120, says, whenever we find the bronze swords or celts, whether in Ireland, in the far west, in Scotland, in distant Scandinavia, in Germany, or still farther east, in the Slavonic countries, they are the same, not similar in character, but identical. Says Sir John Lubbock, Prehistoric Times, page 59. Not only...
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but right now there should be no more ads. There should be no more ads. And if you refresh the page, it should give you the option to donate, which again, you do not have to. I don't expect it. All I ask is that you like the video, subscribe, and but if you want to, it should be there. And if you don't have premium, you may see ads. Not me. I have it turned off, but let me know if you have. And someone please tell me if you have the ability after you refresh to donate.
Are the several varieties of celts found throughout Europe alike, but some of the swords, knives, daggers, etc., are so similar that they seem as if they must have been cast by the same maker. What race was there, other than the people of Atlantis, that existed before the Iron Age, before the Greek, Roman, Etruscan, and Phoenician, that was civilized, that worked in metals, that carried on a commerce with all parts of Europe? Does history or tradition make mention of any such? We find a great resemblance between the pottery of the Bronze Age in Europe and the pottery of the ancient
what's up, man?
inhabitants
Welcome. I hope
of
you
America.
like this.
The two figures.
If you're here from the Nephilim Death Squad, this right here, this is a live stream. And I don't do there's other stuff. I do bi-weekly interviews as well. I got a great interview coming out tomorrow with a PhD student on Machiavelli. She was incredible. I have to cut out quite a bit of it for some, just because there was some stuff in there that I think would get, I'm probably being I'm probably being a little bit too cautious. It's probably unnecessary, but she's Jewish. And that's somewhat irrelevant, but also, oh yes, and Blue Frost has seen it. I think I am being a little bit too cautious, but a lot of it is cut off. She is Jewish, which is not that relevant, really, I guess. But there were some things that she said. It actually kind of helps that she's Jewish, because there's some things that she said which are not themselves anti-Semitic, but they carry some things that some people might take as anti-Semitic. And I'd like to be very clear. I am not anti-Semitic. And I'm not pretending to not be anti-Semitic. And that's both to people who would view that positively and negatively. If you are, whatever, we all have our own things. But I need everybody to understand, I'm just not. I don't have these prejudices. I just don't. But that's coming out. It's their early episodes, usually about 2 weeks in advance. It depends. And that's on Patreon. The Nephilim Death Squad episode, which was fantastic, it'll be on the Patreon soon as well.
Figures on page 260 represent
Thank you
bases
so much,
from one
Nancy.
of the mounds of the Mississippi.
Nancy proves that the donations are on by donating. What a G. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please like the video, subscribe if you're not, and now there should be less interruptions.
Mississippi Valley. Compare them with the following from the lake dwellings of Switzerland. Vases from Switzerland. It will be seen that these vases could scarcely stand upright unsupported, and we find that the ancient inhabitants of Switzerland had circles or rings of baked earth in which they placed them when in use, as in the annexed figure. The mound builders used the same contrivance. The illustrations of discoidal stones on page 263 are from the North Americans of Antiquity, page 77. The objects represented there were taken from an ancient mound in Illinois. It would be indeed surprising if two distinct peoples living in two different continents, thousands of miles apart, should, without any intercourse with each other, not only form their vases in the same inconvenient form, but should hit upon the same expedient as a remedy. We observe in the American spearhead and the Swiss hatchets on the opposite page the same overlapping of the metal around the staff, or handle, a very peculiar mode of uniting them together, which is now passed out of use. A favorite design of the men in the Bronze Age in Europe is the spiral or double spiral form. It appears on the face of the urn
please let me
in
know.
the shape of a lake dwelling, which was given on page 255. It also appears in the rock sculptures of Argyllshire, Scotland, here shown below. We find the same figure in an ancient fragment of pottery from the Little Colorado, as given in the United States Pacific Railway Survey Report, Volume 3, page 49, article Pottery. It was part of a large vessel. The annexed illustration represents this. Discoidal stones, Illinois. Copper spearhead, Lake Superior. Bronze hatchets, Switzerland. The same design is also found in ancient rock etchings of the Zunis of New Mexico, of which the cut on page 265 is an illustration. We also find this figure repeated upon vases from a Mississippi Valley mound which were given elsewhere. It is found upon many of the monuments of Central America. In the treasure house of Atreus at Mycenae, Greece, a fragment of a pillar was found, which is literally covered with this double spiral design. See Rosengarten's Architectural Styles, page 59. This treasure house of Atreus is one of the oldest buildings in Greece. We find the double spiral figure upon a shell ornament found on the breast of a skeleton in a carefully constructed stone coffin in a mound near Nashville, Tennessee. Lenormant remarks, Ancient Civilization, Volume 2, page 158, that the bronze implements found in Egypt near Memphis had been buried for 6,000 years, and that at that time, as the Egyptians had a horror of the sea, some commercial nation must have brought the tin, of which the bronze was in part composed, from India, the Caucasus, or Spain, the nearest points to Egypt in which tin is found. Here has shown that the civilized plants of the lake dwellings were not of Asiatic, but of African, and to a great extent of Egyptian origin. Their stone axes are made largely of jade or nephrite, a mineral which, strange to say, geologists have not found in place on the continent of Europe. Foster's Prehistoric Races, page 44. Compare this picture of a copper axe from a mound near LaPorte, Indiana, with this representation of a copper axe of the Bronze Age found near Waterford, Ireland. Professor Foster
dude,
pronounces
that
them
is so
almost
funny.
identical.
That's like near my hometown. Well, not Waterford, Ireland, but Waterford, Connecticut. That's my
Compare
home
this
county,
specimen of pottery from the lake dwellings of Switzerland with the following specimen from San
which is named
Jose,
after Waterford,
Mexico.
Ireland.
Professor Foster calls attention to the striking resemblance in the design of these two widely separated works of art, one belonging to the Bronze Age of Europe, the other to the Copper Age of America. Illustration: fragment of pottery, Lake Neuchâtel, Switzerland; fragment of pottery, San Jose, Mexico. These, then, in conclusion, are our reasons for believing that the Bronze Age of Europe has relation to Atlantis. 1. The admitted fact that it is anterior in time to the Iron Age relegates it to a great antiquity. 2. The fact that it is anterior in time to the Iron Age is conclusive that it is not due to any of the known European or Asiatic nations, all of which belong to the Iron Age. 3. The fact that there was in Europe, Asia, or Africa no copper or tin age prior to the Bronze Age is conclusive testimony that the manufacture of bronze was an importation into these continents from some foreign country. 4. The fact that in America alone of all the world is found the Copper Age, which must necessarily have preceded the Bronze Age, teaches us to look to the westward of Europe and beyond the sea for that foreign country. 5. We find many similarities in forms of implements between the Bronze Age of Europe and the Copper Age of America. 6. If Plato told the truth, the Atlanteans were a great commercial nation, trading to America and Europe, and at the same time they possessed bronze, and were great workers in the other metals. 7. We shall see hereafter that the mythological traditions of Greece referred to a Bronze Age which preceded an Iron Age, and placed this in the
look,
lands of the
I should be very
gods,
clear.
which
I've
was
said
an
this
island in the
before,
Atlantic
but
Ocean.
we don't know how much of this is really true. It's just, we're listening to this to see what they have to say. I'm not going to, it's too long. It's like 30 hours. I can't just stop to check everything. That would be ridiculous. So, probably true. I shouldn't even say probably true. Like, some of the direct claims, like, unless he was just blatantly lying, are probably true. But some of this stuff might be based on, old methodology and might not be as concrete. And, before when he was like making connections between things, I didn't think there was a lot of validity to that. But it's all very interesting.
Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, and this land was, as we shall see, clearly Atlantis. 8. As we find but a small development of the Bronze Age in America, it is reasonable to suppose that there must have been some intermediate station between America and Europe, where, during a long period of time, the Bronze Age was developed out of the Copper Age, and immense quantities of bronze implements were manufactured and carried to Europe. End of Part 3, Chapter 8. Recording by Mark Applestock, Parlin,
new voice,
New Jersey.
new voice. What's it going to be?
Section 25, Part 3, Chapter 9.
She's back. I love this lady. Okay.
Of Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nadine Eckert-Boulet. Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly.
It's
Chapter
distracting.
9.
In a good way,
Artificial deformation of the skull. An examination of the American monuments shows, see figure on page 269, that the people represented were in the habit of flattening the skull by artificial means. The Greek and Roman writers had mentioned this practice, but it was long totally forgotten by the civilized world until it was discovered, as an unheard of wonder, to be the usage among the Carib Islanders and several Indian tribes in North America. It was afterward found that the ancient Peruvians...
I think the word is it's a breathy voice is the thing. I'm sorry. This is not a smut channel here. Okay, just gonna listen.
And Mexicans practiced this art. Several flattened Peruvian skulls are depicted in Morton's Crania Americana. It is still in use among the Flathead Indians of the northwestern parts of the United States.
Randall. Okay.
In 1849, a remarkable memoir appeared from the pen of Mr. Rathke, showing that similar skulls had been found near Kerch in the Crimea, and calling attention to the Book of Hippocrates, De Aeris Aquis et Locu, Liber 4, and a passage of Strabo which speaks of the practice among the Scythians. In 1854, Dr. Fitzinger published
early Indo-Aryans. Oh my gosh, dude, there's so much stuff in this. Nancy, this belongs in OnlyFans. Yeah, it's look, I think it's just I don't, she's just talking. It's probably just her voice. She can't help it, but I can see all the guys' eyes glazing over and tuning out that fear. I love the women in the comments responding to this. Even I'm glad that even the women understand. Demure is a good way to say it. Yeah.
To learn the memoir on the skulls of the Avars, a branch of the Uralian race of Turks. He shows that the practice of flattening the head had existed from an early date throughout the East.
Randall, I'd like to hear more about this. I'm very swamped right now, but I want to hear more about this.
Which had lately been found in Lower Austria. Skulls similarly flattened have been found in Switzerland and Savoy. The Huns under Attila had the same practice of flattening the heads. Professor Anders Retzius proved, see Smithsonian Report, 1859, that the custom still exists in the south of France and in parts of Turkey. Not long since, a French physician surprised the world by the fact that nurses in Normandy were still giving the children's heads a sugar loaf shape by bandages and a tight cap, while in Brittany they preferred to press it round. No doubt they are doing so to this day. Tyler's Anthropology, page 241. Professor Wilson remarks, "Trifling as it may appear, it is not without interest to have the fact brought under our notice by the disclosures of ancient Barrows insist that the same practice of nursing the child and carrying it about, bound to a flat cradle-board, prevailed in Britain and the north of Europe long before the first notices of written history reveal the presence of man beyond the Baltic or the English Channel, and that in all probability the same custom prevailed continuously from the shores of the German Ocean to Bering Strait." Smithsonian
Here's what I'm thinking about with his voice.
Report, 1862, page 286. Dr. L.A. Goes testifies to the prevalence of the same custom among the Caledonians and Scandinavians in the earliest times, and Dr. Thurman has treated of the same peculiarity among the Anglo-Saxons. Crania Britannica, chapter 4, page 38. Here, then, is an extraordinary and unnatural practice which has existed from the highest antiquity.
Cop buddy movies. This is one of my favorites. I think Rush Hour 3. Anybody remember this? This woman? Great actress as well. I don't know her name, but in this movie, yeah, this is all I'm thinking of. I'm going to leave that up while we're doing this.
The vast regions of country on both sides of the Atlantic, and which is perpetuated unto this day in races as widely separated as the Turks, the French, and the Flathead Indians. Is it possible to explain this except by supposing that it originated from some common center? The annexed out represents an ancient Swiss skull from a cemetery near Lausanne, from a drawing of Frédéric Troyon. Compare this with the illustration given on page 271, which represents a Peruvian flathead copied from Morton's Ethnography and Archaeology of the American Aborigines, 1846.
Aborigines? It's fine. She can mispronounce whatever word she wants to.
The dotted lines indicate the course of the bandages by which the skull...
Because she's French and it's not her first language. Okay, that's the only reason why I said that.
Was deformed. The following heads are from Del Rio's account of Palenque, copied into Nutt and Gliddon's
Palenque?
Types of Mankind, page 440. They show that the receding forehead was a natural characteristic of the ancient people of Central America. The same form of head has been found even in fossil skulls. We may therefore conclude that the skull flattening, which we find to have been practiced in both the Old and New Worlds, was an attempt of other races to imitate the form of skull of a people whose likenesses are found on the monuments of Egypt and of America. It has been shown that this peculiar form of the head was present even in the fetus of the Peruvian mummies. Hippocrates tells us that the practice among the
It's fine.
Scythians
Don't even
was
worry
for
about
the
it.
purpose of giving a certain aristocratic distinction. Aimé de Thierry, in his History of Attila, says the Huns used it for the same reason, and the same purpose influences the Indians of Oregon.
It's so crazy. I didn't realize.
Dr. Lund, a Swedish naturalist, found in the bone caves of Minas Gerais, Brazil, ancient human bones associated with the remains of extinct quadrupeds. These skulls, says Lund, show not only the peculiarity of the American race, but in excessive degree even to the entire disappearance of the forehead. Sir Robert Schomburgk found on some of the affluents of the Orinoco a tribe known as Frog Indians, whose heads were flattened by nature, as shown in newly born children. In the accompanying plate we show the difference in the conformation of the forehead in various races. The upper dotted line, A, represents the shape of the European forehead, the next line, B, that of the Australian, the next, C, that of the
I
mound
think she's
builder of the
French.
United
I'm not
States,
sure, but I think
the
so.
next, D, that of the Guanche of the Canary Islands, and the next, E, that of a skull from the Inca cemetery of Peru. We have but to compare these lines with the skulls of the Egyptians, Kurds, and the heroic type of heads in the statues of the gods of Greece, to see that there was formerly an ancient race marked by a receding forehead, and that the practice of flattening the skull was probably an attempt to approximate the shape of the head to this standard of an early civilized and dominant people. Not only do we find the same receding forehead in the skulls of the ancient races of Europe and America, and the same attempt to imitate this natural and peculiar conformation by artificial flattening of the head, but it has been found, see Henry Gilman's Ancient Men in Michigan, Smithsonian Report, 1875, page 242, that the mound builders and Peruvians of America and the Neolithic people of France and the Canary Islands had alike an extraordinary custom of boring a circular hole in the top of the
Were
skulls
they
of
really?
their dead, so that the
See, this right now, this is why we have the benefit of having such a diverse audience here, is that, you know, we have people from all over the world with different experiences. And well, former Muslim, I believe you told us, the old Turks were made fun of in the Quran for their flat heads. Wow. Very interesting. Of course, Turkey is a country where there isn't a lot of Turkish DNA in modern Turks, just like there isn't a lot of Magyar. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Hungarian. Their DNA isn't really in Hungarians in a similar way. Very, very common for cultures based in steppe peoples. There's just not enough of them, and they tend to rule over a people. But very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Love it when people share stuff that they know about from their own culture. Lets us think outside of the Western tradition that people like Flint Dibble want us to stick to.
soul might
It's either the
readily
Quran
pass
or the
in
Hadiths.
and
My
out.
memory
More
escapes me.
than
That's
this,
okay.
it has been found
Either
that
one.
in all these ancient populations, the skeletons exhibit a remarkable degree of platicnemism, or flattening of the tibia, or leg bones.
I love how
Ibid,
she says tibia. Say
1873,
whatever she wants.
page 367. In this respect, the mound builders of Michigan were identical with the men of Cro-Magnon and the ancient inhabitants of Wales. The annexed ancient Egyptian heads, copied from the monuments, indicate either that the people of the Nile deformed their heads by pressure upon the front of the skull, or that there was some race characteristic which gave this appearance to their heads. These heads are all the heads of priests, and therefore represented the aristocratic class. The first illustration below is taken from a stucco relief found in a temple at Palenque, Central America. The second is from an Egyptian monument of the time of Ramesses IV. The outline drawing on the following page shows the form of
Yeah,
the
Brent,
skull
that's why
of
I'm
the
not
royal
looking it up.
Inca line. The receding forehead here seems to be natural and not the result of artificial compression. Both illustrations at the bottom of the preceding page show the same receding form of the forehead due to either artificial deformation of the skull or to a common race characteristic. We must add the fact that the extraordinary practice of deforming the skull was found all over Europe and America to the catalogue of other proofs that the people of both continents were originally united in blood and race.
Just spit out my
With the
tea.
cognate, the
I'm
practice of
I'm very appreciative that like we're not offending, like the men in here are not offending the women with our. I'm not even gonna put a word to it. You know what I'm talking about. Thank you for that.
circumcision, unity of religious beliefs and customs, folklore, and alphabetical signs, language and flood legends,
Welcome,
we
Raccoon. Glad
array
to have you.
together a mass of unanswerable proofs of prehistoric identity of race. End of
Yes.
chapter 9.
Section 26, Part 4, Chapter 1 of Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. This is a LibriVox recording.
Okay.
All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Amy Graymore, Atlantis the Antediluvian World. Part 4, The Mythologies of the Old World, A Recollection of Atlantis.
What accent
Chapter
is
1,
this?
Traditions of Atlantis.
Is this Boston? I'm gonna try to figure it out while we're going.
We find allusions to the Atlanteans in the most ancient traditions of many different races.
It's not
The
Boston,
great
but it's.
antediluvian king of the Mussulman was Shed-Ad Ben-Ad, or Shed-Ad, the
Oh,
son
you
of
came
Ad,
from it. Yeah,
or
Nancy,
Atlantis.
you've got much worse.
Among the Arabians, the first inhabitants of that country are known as the Adites, from their progenitor, who is called Ad, the grandson of Ham. These Adites were probably the people of Atlantis, or Atlantis. They are personified by a monarch to whom everything is ascribed, and to
Oh
whom is
yeah,
assigned
stuff my
several
face
centuries
with
of life.
Pepperidge Farm.
Ancient
Sorry,
History of the
sorry.
East,
Not that
Renermont
sorry.
and Chevalier, Volume 2, page 295. Ad came from the northeast. He married 1,000 wives, had 4,000 sons, and lived 1,200 years. His descendants multiplied considerably. After his death,
Is it
his
Northern
sons
Virginia?
Shadid and Shaddad
It's got
reigned in succession
mid-Atlantic
over the
a
Adites.
little bit.
In the time of the latter, the people of Ad were 1,000 tribes, each composed of several thousands of men.
It'd be funny if like this woman looks like Megan Fox and the other one just doesn't.
Great conquests are attributed to Shaddad. He subdued, it is said,
Non-regional American.
all
It's a little
Arabia
bit
and
different than
Iraq.
that. I would say
The
that like
migration
mine
of
is
the
more like that.
Canaanites, their
New
establishment
England
in
is very
Syria,
preppy, very
and the shepherd invasion of
enunciated.
Egypt are, by many Arab writers, attributed
Yeah,
to an
she's
expedition
not
of
French.
Shaddad.
This
Ibid, page
lady is
296.
aggressively American.
Shaddad built a palace ornamented with superb columns
Ornamented.
and
What
surrounded
is
by a
that?
magnificent garden. It
Garden.
was called Iran.
Wait, maybe it is
was a
around Boston. It's not Boston, but it could be around it.
Paradise that Shaddad had built in imitation of the celestial paradise, of whose delights he had heard.
Oh, speaking of Appalachia, that is Baltimore. It's Baltimore. I think Brent's correct. The Appalachian accent is very nice.
Ancient History of the East, page 296. In other words, an ancient, sun-worshipping, powerful, and conquering
You know what? It's not as bad as like the Minnesota accent. That one is very rough.
race overran Arabia at the very dawn of history.
A Yankee
They were the
accent.
sons
Yep.
of Atlantis.
I'm a true Yankee.
Their king tried to create a palace and garden of Eden, like that of Atlantis.
I didn't nail it. It was a
The
commenter.
Adites
It's
are
Brent.
remembered by
But
the
yeah,
Arabians
this is
as a great
Baltimore.
and civilized race. They are depicted as men of gigantic stature. Their strength was equal to their size, and they easily moved enormous blocks of stone. Ibid. They were architects and builders. They raised many monuments of their power, and hence among the Arabs arose the custom of calling great ruins buildings of the Adites. To this day the Arabs say, as old as Ad. In the Koran allusion is made to the edifices they built on high places for vain uses, expressions proving that their idolatry was considered to have been tainted.
Yeah, I think the Minnesota Minnesota. Wait, dirty talk? I read that as trash talk at first. It's very Canadian, which is very good.
But Sabiism, or
What is
star
up,
worship.
Athenplier?
Ibid.
Athenplier. Very
In
nice.
these legends,
Glad to
says
have you.
Lenormant, we find traces of a wealthy nation, constructors of great buildings, with an advanced civilization analogous to that of Chaldea, professing a religion similar to the Babylonian. A nation, in short, with whom material progress was allied to great moral depravity and obscene rites. These facts must be true and strictly historical, for they are everywhere met with among the Cushites, as among the Canaanites, their brothers by origin. Nor is there wanting a great catastrophe which destroys the whole Adite nation, except a very few, who escape because they had renounced idolatry. A black cloud assails their country, from which proceeds a terrible hurricane, the waterspout, which sweeps away everything. The first Adites were followed by a second Adite race, probably the colonists who had escaped the deluge. The center of its power was the country of Sheba proper. This empire endured for 1,000 years. The Adites are represented upon the Egyptian monuments as very much like the Egyptians themselves. In other words, they were a red or sunburnt race. Their great temples were pyramidal, surmounted by buildings. Ancient History of the East, page 321. The Sabians, says Agarthacides, De Mare Erythro, page 102, have in their houses an incredible number of vases and utensils of all sorts, of gold and silver, beds and tripods of silver, and all the furniture of astonishing richness. Their buildings have porticos with columns sheathed with gold, or surmounted by capitals of silver. On the friezes, ornaments, and the framework of the doors, they place plates of gold encrusted with precious stones. All this reminds one of the descriptions given by the Spaniards of the temples of the sun in Peru. The Adites worshipped the gods of the Phoenicians under names but slightly changed. Their religion was especially solar. It was originally a religion without images, without idolatry, and without a priesthood. Ibid, page 325.
Religion without a priesthood.
They worshipped the sun from the tops of pyramids. Ibid. They believed in the immortality of the soul. In all these things we see resemblances to the Atlanteans. The great Ethiopian or Kushite empire, which in the earliest ages prevailed.
On the first two, I was framing this as like, oh, is the book racist? And now we're just, some of the parts are explicitly racist, but by the standards of today, of course, which I was expecting. But one of the weird things, and this is something I actually saw in a screenshot that Dibble shared, is that, like, yeah, he's talking about, oh, the Atlanteans are like white. No, that's not what Donnelly even claims. He brings up the Aryans, yeah, which regardless of talking about them, I mean, people call the Aryans, the Indo-Europeans, whatever you want to call them, they like, oh, talking about them is white supremacy, but like, no, they're historic people. Okay. It's what, the Yamnaya? Like, we can't talk about a people that existed. Doesn't make any sense. But he also talked about the Kushites. He did say some negative things about sub-Saharans that are not Kushites, that are not from like Ethiopia, Somalia area. But like, it's not about just white people. So like, what the heck?
As Mr. Rawlinson says, from the Caucasus to the Indian Ocean, from the shores of the Mediterranean to the mouth of the Ganges, was the empire of Dionysus, the empire of Ad, the empire of Atlantis. El-Idrisi called the language spoken to this day by the Arabs of Mara in eastern Arabia the language of the people of Ad.
Look, and even look, I don't care. I'm not racist myself. I'm just not. If I was, I would say I was. I don't care. Everybody's welcome here. I want the diversity. I want it. But regardless of what I say, no matter what, these types of people are going to be like, oh, you're talking about racism. You're pushing white supremacy. I got no patience for it. I don't care. I am whatever you say I am. If that's your perception, that's fine. You thinking I am something does not make me that thing. And I know that I'm not. And the people important to me, including plenty of black people and people of all races, know that I'm not racist. So if some random person through, not being like some nefarious purpose wants to label me as that, and they're almost always white, by the way, which is also like, shut up, dude. Like if you think I'm racist and you're not white, I'll at least hear you out. But like, if you're telling me I'm racist and you're white, shut up. I don't care. You're just as white as I am. Doesn't matter. And being white is not a bad thing. And saying that being white is not a bad thing does not make me racist. Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah, look, we have no patience for that here, and that's not what we're doing. This comment section is multiracial, multi-ethnic, multinational. That's what it is. Everybody's going to be welcome here. It's okay. Now, yeah, this is the route. Why do we? It's not us. It's people like Flint and Hoops who use it as a weapon because they don't have the information to argue. They have to label things. They have to dismiss things with these isms. If they had good evidence to disprove anything, especially my work, which is not based on speculation or a hypothesis like Hancock's, which is fine. He's allowed to bring up a hypothesis. My work is not based on that. And, you know, these people haven't really actually accused me personally of this, but they will, I'm sure. There was a 24-year-old the other day who was accusing me of racism and whatever, but she's 24 years old. She thinks she still lives in a liberal arts college, so she thinks everything's racist. She probably thinks bananas are racist. That's the first thing that pops into my head. But yeah, it's just BS. And it's the mark that they have no argument to make. Okay.
And Dr. J.H.
Rant
Carter,
over.
in the Bombay Journal of July 1847, says, "It is the softest and sweetest language I have ever heard. It would be interesting to compare this primitive tongue with the languages of..."
And if you know me, you know that I do talk to racist people. And those racist people know that I'm not racist. It's fine. Okay, rant really over now.
Central America. The god Thoth of the Egyptians, who was the god of a foreign country and who invented letters, was called At-Hothes. We turn now to another ancient race, the Indo-European family, the Aryan race. In Sanskrit, Adam means first. Among the
Right.
Hindus,
Thank
the
you
first
for joining
man
us.
was Adima. His wife was Hiva. They
I
dwelt
am
upon
monkey
an
as well.
island said to be
I love
Ceylon.
bananas.
They
5 till
left the
midnight
island and
enjoyers
reached the
know.
mainland, when, by a great convulsion
Quick
of
plug
nature,
for 5 till midnight. That's my
their
other podcast
communication
with the
the parent
boys
land was
Monday
forever
night.
cut off.
It's much
See
less
Bible in
serious than
India.
this. We talk politics.
Here we seem to have a recollection of the destruction of Atlantis. Mr. Bryant says, Ad and
Yes.
Ada signify
Bananas
the
in the
first.
chat.
The
That's my
Persians
symbol.
called the
Banana
first
emojis in the
man
chat.
Adama.
Ooh, ooh, ah, ah,
Adon was
motherfucker.
one of the names of the supreme god of the Phoenicians. From it was derived the name of the Greek god Adonis. The Arvad of Genesis was the Ar-Ad of the Cushites. It is now known as Ruad. It is a series of connected cities 12 miles in length along the coast, full of the most massive and gigantic ruins. Sir William Jones
Thank you,
gives the tradition
JC.
of the Persians
That
as
episode
to
will
the
be
earliest
up.
ages.
It's on NDS's
He says,
Patreon right now. It'll
Moshin
be up on
assures
mine
us
very
that in the
soon.
opinion of the best informed
Link is
Persians,
below.
the first monarch of Iran and of the whole earth was Mashab-Ad, that he received from the Creator and promulgated
say
among men a sacred book
Monarch?
in a heavenly language, to which the Mussulman author gives the Arabic title
Yo.
of Desatir, or regulations.
There are like 7 people in the comments saying, oh my God, hi, JC. JC, you are a treasure, brother. Everybody, I treasure all of you. I treasure all of you. But JC holds a special place in my heart for the positivity that he brings to the comment section. I want to keep that energy. Keep our multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multinational. We're all just here to have fun and enjoy this stuff. And thank you so much for being here, everybody. Monarch.
Mashab-Ad was, in the opinion of the ancient Persians, the person left at the end of the last great cycle, and consequently the father of the present world. He and his wife, having survived the former cycle, were blessed with a numerous progeny. He planted gardens, invented ornaments, forged weapons, taught men to take the fleece from sheep and make clothing. He built cities, constructed palaces, fortified towns, and introduced arts and commerce.
Arts and commerce.
We have already seen that the primal gods of this people are identical with the gods of the Greek mythology, and were originally kings of Atlantis. But it seems that these ancient divinities are grouped together as the Aditya, and in this name, Aditya, we find a strong likeness to the Semitic Adites and another reminiscence of Atlantis or Atlantis. In corroboration of this view we find 1. The gods who are grouped together as the Aditya are the most ancient in the Hindu mythology. 2. They are all gods of light, or solar gods. Whitney's Oriental and Linguistic Studies, page 39. 3. There are 12 of them. Ibid. 4. These 12 gods presided over 12 months in the year. 5. They are a dim recollection of a very remote past. Says Whitney, it seems as if here was an attempt on the part of the Indian religion to take a new development in a moral direction, which a change in the character and circumstances of the people has caused to fail in the midst, and fall back again into forgetfulness, while yet half finished and indistinct. Ibid. 6. These gods are called the sons of Aditi, just as in the Bible we have allusions to the sons of Ada, who were the first metallurgists and musicians. Aditi is not a goddess. She is addressed as a queen's daughter, she of fair children. 7. The Aditya are elevated above all imperfections. They do not sleep or wink. The Greeks represented their gods as equally wakeful and omniscient. Their character is all truth. They hate and punish guilt. We have seen the same traits ascribed by the Greeks to the Atlantean kings. 8. The sun is sometimes addressed as Aditya. 9. Among the Aditya is Varuna, the equivalent of Uranus, whose identification with Atlantis I have shown. In the Vedas, Varuna is the god of the ocean.
So one of the things, somebody else is probably wondering about this. That's one thing. I did get certified as a teacher. If somebody has a question, there's probably others that have it. So if you see, like I bring up this comment, you shouldn't, if you're on YouTube, you're not going to see this comment because this is a comment from X. So most of the people are on YouTube. And if you want to join on YouTube as well to see all of the comments, because I only bring up some of them there, but you should probably see all of them from YouTube. You might not be. There could be something else, but if they got the little X thing there, it's like it's down there in the bottom left. It's because they're from X and they're not going to show up on YouTube.
10. The Aditya represent
Yeah,
an
he
earlier
would.
and
I mean,
purer
he's
form
seething
of
at
religion.
everything. He's very
Well, in
sensitive.
hymns to the other deities, long life,
The thing
wealth,
is, like,
power.
you know, I don't want to have animosity with Flint. I just wish that he engaged differently. And I've said it once, and I've said it many times. All will be forgiven if Flint changes his tune with no more questions asked. I don't even really care if he apologizes that much. He doesn't have to. He just has to change the way he's engaging, not accuse people of these isms. I think that we'd all be better off if we work together. There are pros and cons to different approaches. Everybody here should know that I do mostly work within regular anthropology, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to talk about other stuff that they don't want to. I'm not in academia. I'm not, for good reason. I don't hate the guy. I think he has some beliefs and some ways of talking about information that is not in the way that I would do it. I do think it was very wrong for him to threaten to try to take away dedunking's livelihood. That's probably in line with one of the worst things that he did, which is also the way that he approached Graham Hancock. And I don't like any of that at all. But I don't hate Flint. Regardless, he'll just continue to think that me and debunking and other people want to take away his job. I don't want you to harass Flint if you're in the comments. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to email his job. We don't have to do that. I just want to talk about the information, and I really wish that it wasn't like this, but unfortunately it is. But yes, I just want to listen to this stuff, man. I just want to talk to people about it in the comments. I love it. I love having you guys here. Thank you so much for being here. And sorry, let's continue.
Are the objects commonly prayed for. Of the Aditya is craved purity, forgiveness of sin, freedom from guilt, and repentance. Oriental
Yeah, I'm
linguistic
familiar with
studies,
Robert
page
Seffer.
43.
He says
11.
some things
The
I
Aditya,
don't agree
like the
with, but
Adites, are identified with
like
the
anyone else,
doctrine
I
of
don't
the
fully
immortality
condemn
of
him.
the soul. Yama is the god of the abode beyond the grave.
I agree.
In the Persian story, he appears as Yima, and is made ruler of the Golden Age and founder of the paradise. Ibid, page 45. See Zamna, page 167 ante. In view of all these facts, one cannot doubt that the legends of the sons of Ad, the Adites, and the Aditya all refer to Atlantis. Mr. George Smith, in the Chaldean account of the creation, page 78, deciphered from the Babylonian tablets, shows that there was an original race of men at the beginning of the Chaldean history, a dark race, the Zalmat Kwakwadi, who were called Admi or Adami. They were the race who had fallen and were contradistinguished from the Saku or light race. The fall probably refers to their destruction by a deluge, in consequence of their moral degradation and the indignation of the gods. The name Adam is used in these legends,
Damn it, I'm still here.
but as the name of a race, not of a man. Genesis chapter 5:2 distinctly says that God created man, male and female, and called their name Adam. That is to say, the people were the Adami, the people of Ad or Atlantis.
I've never
The
heard
author
that.
of the book of Genesis, says Monsieur Scobel, in speaking of the men who were swallowed up by the deluge, always describes them as Hadam, Adamite humanity. The
I
race
agree.
of Cain lived and multiplied far away
Yes,
from the land of Seth.
you're right. Endless days of summer.
In other words, far from the
The
land
problem is that
destroyed
they
by
want
the
their current
deluge.
theories to be taken as fact.
Josephus, who gives us the primitive traditions of the Jews, tells us, chapter 2, page 42, that Cain traveled over many countries before he came to the land of Nod. The Bible does not tell us that the race of Cain perished in the deluge. Cain went out from the presence of Jehovah. He did not call on his name. The people that were destroyed were the sons of Jehovah. All this indicates
This is a
that
very
large
interesting
colonies
book
had
at the
been
very
sent
least.
out by the motherland before it sunk in the sea. Across the ocean we find the people of Guatemala claiming their descent from a goddess called Atit, or grandmother, who lived for 400 years and first taught the worship of the true God, which they afterward forgot. Bancroft's Native Races,
What does
Volume
that
3,
mean?
page 75.
You forgot?
While the famous
You forgot
Mexican
about the true
calendar
God?
stone
How the hell does
shows
that
that the
happen?
sun was commonly
I'm
called
not saying it's impossible,
Tonatia,
but what does that mean?
but when it was referred to as the god of the deluge, it was then called Adeltonatia, or At Onatia. Valentini's Mexican calendar stone, article Maya Archaeology, page 15. We thus find the sons of Ad at the base of all the most ancient races of men,
I don't have
to
this
wit the
part.
Hebrews, the
I don't know.
Arabians,
I'm
the
going to look for a different
Chaldeans,
version of
the
this.
Hindus, the Persians, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, the Mexicans, and the Central Americans. Testimony that all these races trace their beginning back to a dimly remembered
Where does
Atlantis.
Turkish's language
End
family?
of chapter 1 of
This is
part
why I
4.
love having such a diverse comment section. Altaic. Altaic.
Section 27, Part 1 of Chapter 2 of Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public
No.
domain. For more
Wait,
information,
no.
or to
Did you just
volunteer,
join us, James? No, I'm not standing this book. We're just listening to it, man. Absolutely not. I even put in the description that it's crazy. It's just interesting. No, I'm not. Look, I'm not standing this book. I'm going to make that very clear. Did anyone think I was standing this book?
please visit LibriVox.org. Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. Part 4, The Mythologies of the Old World. A Recollection of
Yeah,
Atlantis.
that's a big task,
Chapter
Altenplier.
2, Part 1. The
Definitely.
kings of Atlantis become the gods of the Greeks. Lord Bacon said, the
Also,
mythology
obviously,
of the Greeks,
thank you for the
which their
$10.
oldest
I
writers did
appreciate
not
that,
pretend
brother.
to have invented, was no more than a light air, which had passed from a more ancient people into the flutes of the Greeks, which they modulated to such descents as best suited their fancies. This profoundly wise and great man, who has illuminated every subject which he has touched, guessed very close to the truth in this utterance. The Hon. W. E. Gladstone has had quite a debate of late with Mr. Cox as to whether the Greek mythology was underlaid by a nature worship, or a planetary or solar worship. Peru, worshipping the sun and moon and planets, probably represents very closely the simple and primitive religion of Atlantis, with its sacrifices of fruits and flowers. This passed directly to their colony in Egypt. We find the Egyptians in their early ages sun and planet worshippers. Ptah was the object of their highest adoration. He is the father of the god of the sun, the ruler of the region of light. Ra was the sun god. He was the supreme divinity at On, or Heliopolis, near Memphis. His symbol was the solar disk.
I like this comment. Let's talk about this comment for a moment. Graham Hancock and Few draw a lot of connections between ancient and contemporary religions. So I was talking about this on the Nephilim Death Squad. That episode is on their Patreon live today. It should be on there, I think, already. It'll be on mine soon. I got to check my email to see if Raven sent it to me. Later religions, they always take from the older religions. There's always stuff in them that comes out. And like they bring in new stuff, of course, and they change, but there's always things that they keep. And you can, it's a spiritual there is a spiritual continuation of those beliefs, and then they're changed based on the new environment. And when I say environment, I'm not talking about just like, the trees and the rocks and whatever. I'm talking also about human environment. So your subsistence strategy, religions like animism is one of the forms. Animism comes in many forms. It's a very broad term. It isn't used a lot in anthropology anymore, because it's so broad to the point of not having a lot of utility for academia. But it's still an okay term to use, to be this all-encompassing term. And in those religions, they make a lot of sense for people that are hunter-gatherer group. But by the time that people start settling down and they're living in towns, cities, villages, there's a changing of their life and how they live their life to the point that it requires a non-arbitrarily different new religion. One of the integral parts of the definition of religion in cultural anthropology, which is the field that essentially deals with how to define religion, and the field that is this channel is based on, is that it is dynamic. It is always changing. Religion changes. There's syncretic religions. I'm of the opinion that basically all religions are syncretic. They combine different things together. A more literal example of that is something like Santeria, which combines older, like other like Yoruba things from Africa with like Catholicism. But they're always changed in line with how people live their lives, their interaction with the world. Welcome, Delete Laws, man. Reach out whenever, brother. I don't know. I saw you didn't have Twitter, I don't think. So I'd love to talk to you more. I loved your channel, what you do. Very brave dude. Thank you for coming out and checking this out. Right now, we're just listening to this old book. This is Ignatius Donnelly from 1882. Just wanted to see what's in it. None of this stuff don't take this as fact. Everybody listening to this, don't take anything in this book as fact, because we don't know what is true in here and not. And like, this is a 30-hour book. We're just going to listen to it. Certain things I might want to check later, so I'm marking them down in the document here. But all of this stuff is, it's older methods, so we can't. It's not as safe to assume that everything in here is true. There's been plenty of research since then, and they had different standards of evidence at this point than modern academia. Not that I fully agree with modern academia. Obviously, I diverge from them, but I mostly do. They're mostly pretty good. But obviously, I'm a free thinker. I'm willing to think my own thing. So welcome, Delete Laws. Reach out to me whenever, man. If you leave a comment or whatever with how you want me to reach out to you whenever you got some time, and we'll talk. But yeah, let's get back to it. I paused too long. This one, usually when I'm doing stuff like this, I have to pause because it's like a reaction, and I'm using someone else's content. But this thing is copyright free, so I can just let it ride.
Rings. He created all that exists.
Also, shout out to LibriVox for creating this free volunteer-led thing. Very nice of them.
And Bel.
Very worthy.
Bel represented the sun and was the favorite god. Sin was the goddess of the moon. The Phoenicians were also sun worshippers.
Very common. So when we're talking about sun worship, sun worship is very, very down there. Hey, James, no worry, brother. I totally understand. People have preconceived notions of what this book is, and I want you to if you have an issue like that, like where you think something, it's totally perfect. It's totally okay for you to ask what it is, because like if I was just taking everything in this book as fact, that would be a big red flag. We're not doing that here. But yeah, totally okay. I'm not offended or anything. Sun worship is like, when you have the sun is, you need the sun, right? You need it. It provides, it provides like warmth and light, and you need it for crops. You need it for everything. There's all of these early things where, primitive is a kind of dirty word, but when we're talking about very basic, very early religions, very basic, I mean like non-complicated, these are very, very common forms of it. And in a lot of ways, like the rain that comes down, and it's fertilizes the earth. There's things where there's metaphors in this of the rain fertilizing the earth is like, seed into a woman's womb. There's all these metaphors built into this, and reasons why people who are living out in nature and they're living before all this light pollution that we have affected our view of the cosmos. I was talking about this as well with Nephilim Death Squad today. This is awesome. And if anyone has any things like James has, where if they have any questions, clarifications they need, more than welcome to ask. Please do it. My answer, you might not like my answer, but I will be honest, and that is my honest answer. So if you have a concern, someone else probably has the same thing. Remember, I am a teacher at the end of the day. Not really anymore, but I'm a certified teacher. So that's, if you have a question, I want to hear what you got to say. If you have a concern, I want to hear what you got to say.
Represented by Baal Samin, the great god, the god of light in the heavens, the creator and rejuvenator. The attributes of both Eel and Moloch, the good and bad
are very
powers
important
of the sun,
because
were
they
united
mark
in the Phoenician
when
god
you plant.
Melkart,
If you're
king of the city,
a
whom the inhabitants of Tyre considered their special patron.
if you're a
The Greeks called him Melicertes and identified him with Hercules.
farming people.
By his great strength and power he turned evil into good, brought life out of destruction, pulled back the sun to the earth at the time of the solstices, lessened excessive heat and cold, and rectified the evil signs of the zodiac. In Phoenician legends he conquers the savage races of distant coasts, founds the ancient settlements on the Mediterranean, and plants the rocks in the Straits of Gibraltar. American Cyclopedia, article Mythology. The Egyptians worshipped the sun under the name of Ra. The Hindus worshipped the sun under the name of Rama, while the great festival of the sun of the Peruvians was called Ra-Mi. Sun worship, as the ancient religions of Atlantis, underlies all the superstitions of the colonies of that country. The Samoyed woman says to the sun, "When thou, God, risest, I too rise from my bed." Every morning, even now, the Brahmins stand on one foot, with their hands held out before them and their faces turned to the east, adoring the sun. In Germany or France one may still see the peasant take off his hat to the rising sun. Anthropology, page 361. The Romans, even in the later times, worshipped the sun at Emesa under the name Elagabalus, typified in the form of a black conical stone,
Yes,
which it was
tradition is very
believed had
important.
fallen from heaven. The conical stone was the emblem of Bel. Did it have relation to the mounds and pyramids? Sun worship was the primitive religion of the red men of America. It was found among all the tribes. Dormant origin of
Choctaw,
primitive
Blackfoot, and
superstitions,
Lakota.
page 330.
I know less about them than I
The
do about
Chicamex called the
northeastern
sun their father.
Eastern
The
Algonquins.
Comanches have a similar belief. But compared
Oh,
with
my
such
bad,
ancient
Vingle.
nations as
My
the
bad.
Egyptians and
Hey,
Babylonians,
if you want to know when I'm going live, I always forget to tell people, hit the subscribe, also hit that notification bell. I rarely ever tell people to do it. If you want to know when I'm going live, hit the notification bell. A lot of oral traditions are lost. Thoughts? The Emerald Tablets, someone brought this up the other day. I don't know anything about it. Someone had left a comment. I know literally nothing about them. I Googled and looked at them for 30 seconds. They look cool. That's the only comment I have.
the Greek were children. A priest of Sais says to Solon, "You Greeks are novices in knowledge of antiquity. You are ignorant of what passed either here or among yourselves in days of old. The history of 8,000 years is deposited in our sacred books, but I can ascend to a much higher antiquity and tell you what our fathers have done for 9,000 years. I mean their institutions, their laws, and their most brilliant achievements." The Greeks, too young to have shared in the religion of Atlantis, but preserving some memory of that great country and its history, proceeded to convert its kings into gods, and to depict Atlantis itself as the heaven of the human race. Thus we find a great solar or nature worship in the elder nations, while Greece has nothing but an incongruous jumble of gods and goddesses, who are born and eat and drink and make love and ravish and steal and die, and who are worshipped as immortal in presence of the very monuments that testify to their death. These deities, to whom the affairs of the world were entrusted, were, it is believed, immortal, though not eternal in their existence. In Crete there was even a story of the death of Zeus, his tomb being pointed out. Murray's Mythology, page 2. The history of Atlantis is the key of the Greek mythology. There can be no question that these gods of Greece were human beings. The tendency to attach divine attributes to great earthly rulers is one deeply implanted in human nature. The savages who killed Captain Cook firmly believed that he was immortal, that he was yet alive and would return.
Ooh, good point for me to talk here. Okay, so I've talked about this before. When we're talking about people. There's always these, like, the people, modern archaeologists, they have these views, these comments, and archaeologists are not cultural anthropologists, so they don't have as much knowledge on the cultural side. That's my specialty. I'm not a PhD in it, but that's what most of my coursework was in, that in like maritime archaeology. So in my area of interest, the thing is that a lot of these early cultures were largely animist, which again is a very broad term, not used as much anymore, but they believed in the energy of all things. This is like pre-polytheism stuff, right? So them thinking that, like, people like Flint Dibble, I don't think I'm misrepresenting him by saying this. I think he's brought this up. I'm not even trying to shit on him right now. It's just an example, but like, if not him, people similar to that, they'll like be like, oh, it's racist to say that they saw this white guy and thought that he was a god. But like, that's not what it's like, man, because it's not like they thought he was the one true Christian God. They don't think he's Yahweh or Allah. They don't think that. They think that everything has spiritual energy in it. Everything, even rocks. Okay. So when you see a guy who is a war leader of a group of men with weird guns that shoot fire, and they don't think, they don't know what a gun is. It's not that they're stupid. It's literally not that they're stupid. They have no experience with this stuff. They've never seen a gun. They've never seen a factory. They've never, some of them, it depends on where they're going. They've never seen a city. Of course, the Aztecs have seen a city. But like, if we're talking about early people, not like settled peoples like the Aztecs living in cities, they think that almost always that things have spiritual energy. So of course, he's a god in the same way that their own leaders are gods. It's not some weird thing where like, oh, the white guy's the god now, he's the one head god. No, it's just, yes, he has this extra, he has an abundance of midichlorians or mana or manitau, whatever you want to call it. And that makes perfect sense within their culture. They're understanding it within their culture. It's not like they're just that way because they're white. That's never been the case. And then with the Aztecs, like Montezuma's the sun god. He's a god himself in their eyes. So of course some other guy is going to be viewed in the same way. But yes.
Turned to punish them. The highly civilized Romans made gods out of their dead emperors. Dr. Livingstone mentions that on one occasion, after talking to a bushman for some time about
I
the
haven't
deity,
seen that.
he found that the savage thought he was speaking of Sekomi, the principal chief of the district. We find the barbarians of the coast of the Mediterranean regarding the civilized people of Atlantis with awe and wonder. Their physical strength was extraordinary, the earth shaking sometimes under their tread. Whatever they did was done speedily. They moved through space almost without the loss of a moment of time. This probably alluded to the rapid motion of their sailing vessels. They were wise and communicated their wisdom to men. That is to say, they civilized the people they came in contact with. They had a strict sense of justice and punished crime rigorously and rewarded noble actions, though it is true they were less conspicuous for the latter. Murray's Mythology, page 4. We should understand this to mean that where they colonized, they established a government of law, as contradistinguished from the anarchy of barbarism. They were tales of personal visits and adventures of the gods among men, taking part in battles and appearing in dreams.
Endless Days of Summer. I
They were
very
conceived
literally
to possess
do
the form
as well.
of human beings and to be like men, subject to love and pain, but always
And
characterized
this type
by
of
the highest
belief
qualities
is
and
very
grandest forms
sustainable.
that could
I'm
be
not going to go into
imagined.
detail. I did it on
Ibid.
Nephilim Death Squad.
Another proof that
That'll
the
be on
gods
the
agreed to
Patreon,
about the
or it's on
deified
theirs.
kings of Atlantis is found in the fact that the gods were not looked upon as having created the world. They succeeded to the management of a world already in existence. The gods dwelt on Olympus. They lived together like human beings. They possessed palaces, storehouses, stables, horses, etc. They dwelt in a social state which was but a magnified reflection of the social system on earth. Quarrels, love passages, mutual assistance, and such instances as characterize human life were ascribed to them. Ibid, page 10. Where was Olympus? It was in Atlantis. The ocean encircled the earth with a great stream, and was a region of wonders of all kinds. Ibid, page 23. It was a great island, the then civilized world. The encircling ocean was spoken of in all the ancient legends. Okeanos lived there with his wife Tethys. These were the islands of the blessed, the garden of the gods, the sources of the nectar and ambrosia on which the gods lived. Murray's Mythology, page 23. Nectar was probably a fermented intoxicating liquor, and ambrosia bread made from wheat. Soma was a kind of whiskey, and the Hindus deified it. The gods lived on nectar and ambrosia. simply meant that the inhabitants of these blessed islands were civilized and
I think
possessed a
ambrosia
liquor of
was
some kind and a species of food superior to
from
anything in use among
Wales,
the barbarous
not
tribes
the
with whom they
country,
came in
but the animal.
contact. This blessed land answers to the description of Atlantis. It was an island full of wonders. It lay spread out in the
Thanks for
ocean
coming,
like
Cynthia.
a
Come
disk,
back and
with the
see
mountains
us.
rising from it. Ibid. On the highest point of this mountain dwelt Zeus, the king, while the mansions of the other deities were arranged upon plateaus or in ravines lower down the mountain. These deities, including Zeus, were 12 in number: Zeus or Jupiter, Hera or Juno, Poseidon or Neptune, Demeter or Ceres, Apollo, Artemis or Diana, Hephaestos or Vulcan, Pallas Athena or Minerva, Ares or Mars, Aphrodite or Venus, Hermes or Mercury, and Hestia or Vesta. These were doubtless the 12 gods from whom the Egyptians derived their kings. Where 2 names are given to a deity in the above list, the first name is that bestowed by the Greeks, the last that given by the Romans. It is not impossible that our division of the year into 12 parts is a reminiscence of the 12 gods of Atlantis. Diodorus Siculus tells us that among the Babylonians there were 12 gods of the heavens, each personified by one of the signs of the zodiac, and worshipped in a certain month of the year. The Hindus had 12 primal gods, the Aditya. Moses erected 12 pillars of Sinai. The Mandan Indians celebrated the flood with 12 typical characters, who danced around the ark. The Scandinavians believed in the 12 gods, the Aesir, who dwelt on Asgard, the Norse Olympus. Diligent investigation may yet reveal that the number of a modern jury, 12, is a survival of the ancient council of Asgard. According to the traditions of the Phoenicians, the gardens of the Hesperides were in the remote west. Murray's Manual of Mythology, page 258. Atlas lived in these gardens. Ibid, page 259. Atlas, we have seen, was king of Atlantis. The Elysian Fields, the Happy Islands, were commonly placed in the remote west. They were ruled over by Cronus. Ibid, page 60. Tartarus, the region of Hades, the gloomy home of the dead, was also located under the mountains of an island in the midst of the ocean in the remote west. Ibid, page 58. Atlas was described in Greek
The
mythology
temple's
as an
located
enormous
on
giant
Olympus.
who stood upon the
I
western
think I
confines of
highlighted
the
that.
earth and supported the heavens on his shoulders, in a region of the west where the sun continued to shine after he had set upon Greece. Ibid, page 156. Greek tradition located the island in which Olympus was situated in the far west, in the ocean beyond Africa, on the western boundary of the known world, where the sun shone when it had ceased to shine on Greece.
So, Nancy, it's funny because you came from Nephilim Death Squad. An older episode with Glass Delusions, who is she does like Zodiac stuff. I would check that out if you're interested. That's on my YouTube channel here. Very interesting stuff. I think she might mention that.
And where the mighty Atlas held up the heavens. And Plato tells us that the land where Poseidon and Atlas ruled was Atlantis. The Garden of the Hesperides, another name for the dwelling place of the gods, was situated at the extreme limit of Africa. Atlas was said to have surrounded it on every side with high mountains. Smith's Sacred Annals, Patriarchal Age, page 131. Here were found the golden apples. This is very much like the description which Plato gives of the great plain of Atlantis, covered with fruit of every kind and surrounded by precipitous mountains descending to the sea. The Greek mythology, in speaking of the Garden of the Hesperides, tells us that the outer edge of the garden was slightly raised, so that the water might not run in and overflow the land. Another reminiscence of the surrounding mountains of Atlantis as described by Plato and as revealed by the deep-sea soundings of modern times. Kronos or Saturn, Dionysus, Hyperion, Atlas, Hercules were all connected with the great Saturnian continent. They were kings that
Hyperion.
ruled over countries on the western shores of the Mediterranean, Africa, and Spain. One account says, Hyperion, Atlas, and Saturn, or Kronos, were sons of Uranos, who reigned over a great kingdom composed of countries around the western part of the Mediterranean, with certain islands in the Atlantic. Hyperion succeeded his father, and was then killed by the Titans. The kingdom was then divided between Atlas and Saturn, Atlas taking the northern Africa, with the Atlantic islands, and Saturn the countries on the opposite shore of the Mediterranean to Italy and Sicily. Baldwin's Prehistoric Nations, page 357. Plato says, speaking of the traditions of the Greeks, Dialogues, Laws, chapter 4, page 713. There is a tradition of the happy life of mankind in the days when all things were spontaneous and abundant. In like manner God, in his love of mankind, placed over us the demons, who are a superior race, and they, with great care and pleasure to themselves, and no less to us,
That sounds like the
taking
Nephilim.
care of us and giving us place and reverence and order and justice never failing, made the tribes of men happy and peaceful. For Cronos knew that no human nature, invested with supreme power, is able to order human affairs and not overflow with insolence and wrong. In other words, this tradition refers to an ancient time when the forefathers of the Greeks were governed by Cronos
Yes.
of the
Thank
Cronian
you,
Sea,
Yakub,
the
for giving me
Atlantic,
life.
king of Atlantis, through civilized Atlantean governors, who by their wisdom preserved peace and created a golden age for all the populations under their control. They were the demons, that is, the knowing ones, the civilized. Plato puts into the mouth of
Praise be to
Socrates
the
these
cube.
words. Dialogues, Cratylus, page 397. My notion would be that the sun, moon, and stars, earth and heaven, which are still the gods of many barbarians, were the only gods known to the aboriginal Hellenes. What shall follow the gods? Must not demons and heroes and men come next? Consider the real meaning of the word demons. You know Hesiod uses the word. He speaks of a golden race of men, who came first. He says of them, but now that fate has closed over this race, they are holy demons upon earth, beneficent averters of ills, guardians of mortal men. He means by the golden men not men literally made out of gold, but good and noble men. He says we are of the age of iron. He called them demons because they were daimones, knowing or wise. This is made the more evident when we read that this region of the gods, of Cronos and Uranus and Zeus, passed through first a golden age, then a silver age, these constituting a great period of peace and happiness. Then it reached a bronze age, then an iron age, and finally perished by a great flood, sent upon these people by Zeus as a punishment for their sins. We read, men were rich then, in the silver age, as in the golden age of Cronos, and lived in plenty. But still they wanted the innocence and contentment which were the true sources of human happiness in the former age, and accordingly, while living in luxury and delicacy, they became overbearing in their manners to the highest degree, were never satisfied, and forgot the gods, to whom in their confidence of prosperity and comfort they denied the reverence they owed. Then followed the Bronze Age, a period of constant quarreling and deeds of violence. Instead of cultivated lands and a life of peaceful occupations and orderly habits, there came a day when everywhere might was right, and men, big and powerful as they were, became physically worn out. Finally came the Iron Age, in which enfeebled mankind had to toil for bread with their hands, and bent on gain, did their best to overreach each other. Dike, or Astrea, the goddess of justice and good faith, modesty and truth, turned her back on such scenes and retired to Olympus, while Zeus determined to destroy the human race by a great flood. The whole of Greece lay under water, and none but Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha were saved. Murray's Mythology, page 44. It is remarkable that we find here the same succession of the Iron Age after the Bronze Age that has been revealed to scientific men by the patient examination of the relics of antiquity in Europe, and this identification of the land that was destroyed by a flood, the land of Cronos and Poseidon and Zeus, with the Bronze Age confirms the view expressed in chapter 8, page 237 ante, that the bronze implements and weapons of Europe were mainly imported from Atlantis. And here we find that the flood that destroyed this land of the gods was the flood of Deucalion, and the flood of Deucalion was the flood of the Bible, and this, as we have shown, was the last great deluge of all, according to the Egyptians, which destroyed Atlantis.
Right.
The foregoing description of the golden age of Cronos, when men were rich and lived in plenty,
The mushroom
reminds us
stuff
of
is very
Plato's description
interesting.
of the happy age of Atlantis, when men despised everything but virtue, not caring for the present state of life, and thinking lightly of the possession of gold and other property. A time when, as the chants of the Delaware Indians stated it, page 109 ante, all were willingly pleased, all were well happified. While the description given by Murray, in the above extract, of the degeneracy of mankind in the land of the gods, a period of constant quarreling and deeds of violence when might was right, agrees with Plato's account of the Atlanteans, when they became aggressive, unable to bear their fortune, unseemly, base, filled with unrighteous avarice and power, and in a most wretched state. And here again I might quote from the chant of the Delaware Indians. They became troubled, hating each other. Both were fighting, both were spoiling, both were never peaceful. And in all three instances the gods punished the depravity of mankind by a great deluge. Can all these precise coincidences be the result of accident? May we not even suppose that the very word Olympus, is a transformation from Atlantis, in accordance with the laws that regulate the changes of letters of the same class into each other? Olympus was written by the Greeks Olympos. The letter A in Atlantis was sounded by the ancient world broad and full, like the A in our words all or altar. In these words it approximates very closely to the sound of O. It is not far to go to convert Atlantis into Aluntus, and this into Olympos. We may therefore suppose that when the Greeks said that their gods dwelt in Olympus, it was the same as if they said they dwelt in Atlantis. Nearly all the gods of Greece are connected with Atlantis. We have seen the 12
Yeah,
principal gods all dwelling on the
I've
mountain
jumped
of
in
Olympus,
a
in the
cenote
midst of an island in the ocean in the
as
far
well.
west, which was subsequently destroyed by a deluge on account of the wickedness of its people. And when we turn to Plato's description of
Cenotes
Atlantis,
are amazing.
page 13 ante, we find that Poseidon and Atlas dwelt upon a mountain in the midst of the island, and on this mountain were the magnificent temples and palaces, where they lived separated by great walls from their subjects. It may be urged that Mount Olympus could not have referred to any mountain in Atlantis, because the Greeks gave that name to a group of mountains partly in Macedonia and partly in Thessaly. But in Mysia, Lycia, Cyprus, and elsewhere there were mountains called Olympus, and on the plain of Olympia in Elis there was an eminence bearing the same designation. There is a natural tendency among uncivilized peoples to give a local habitation to every general tradition. Many of the oldest myths, says Baldwin, Prehistoric Nations, page 376, relate to Spain, northwestern Africa, and other regions on the Atlantic, such as those concerning Hercules, the Cronidæ, the Hyperboreans, the Hesperides, and the
The
islands of the Blessed.
Hyperboreans, I
Homer
see
described
memes
the
about
Atlantic
this all the
region of
time. I
Europe
don't know what it
in
means.
his account of the wanderings of Ulysses. In the ages previous to the decline of Phoenician influence in Greece and around the Aegean Sea, the people of those regions must have had a much better knowledge of Western Europe than prevailed
like
there
she was
during the
saying
Ionian
that.
or Hellenic period. The mythology of
Which is
Greece is
confusing.
really a
I thought it
history of the
was.
kings of Atlantis. The Greek heaven was Atlantis. Hence the references to statues, swords, etc., that fell from heaven and were preserved in the temples of the different states along the shores of the Mediterranean from a vast antiquity, and which were regarded as the most precious possessions of the people. They were relics of the lost race received in the early ages. Thus we read of the brazen
I don't know what it means.
bronze
I got to
anvil
look up eventually
that was
what
preserved in one
Hyperborea
city,
is.
which fell from heaven. It was 9 days and 9 nights in falling. In other words, it took 9
Have
days and
Aztec
nights of a
items.
sailing voyage
That
to
makes
bring it
sense
from
that they
Atlantis.
would be. I've only
The
been in
modern
the Mayan
theory that the
areas
gods
of
of
Mexico,
Greece never
though.
had any personal existence, but represented atmospheric and meteorological myths, the movements of clouds, planets, and the sun, is absurd. Rude nations repeat, they do not invent. To suppose a barbarous people creating their deities out of clouds and sunsets is to reverse nature. Men first worship stones, then other men, then spirits. Resemblances of names prove nothing. It is as if one would show that the name of the great Napoleon meant the lion of the desert, Napoleon, and should thence argue that Napoleon never existed, that he was a myth, that he represented power and solitude, or some such
I'm sorry. He's not talking about... Oh, no, she's making a comparison. I see now.
stuff. When we read that Jove whipped his wife and threw her son out of the window, the inference is that Jove was a man, and actually did something like the thing described. Certainly gods, sublimated spirits, aerial sprites, do not act after this fashion. And it would puzzle the myth-makers to prove that the sun, moon, or stars whipped their wives or flung recalcitrant young men out of windows. The history of Atlantis could be in part reconstructed out of the mythology of Greece.
And shit.
It is a history of kings, queens, and princes, of love-making, adulteries, rebellions, wars, murders, sea voyages, and colonizations, of palaces, temples, workshops, and forges, of sword-making, engraving, and metallurgy, of wine, barley, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, and agriculture generally. Who can doubt that it represents the history of a real people? Uranus was the first god, that is to say, the first king of the great race. As he was at the commencement of all things, his symbol was the sky. He probably represented the race previous even to the settlement of Atlantis. He was a son of Gaia,
yeah, that's what I was
the
saying.
earth. He seems to have been the parent of 3 races, the Titans, the Hecatoncheires, and the Cyclopes or Cyclops. I incline to the belief that these were civilized races, and that the peculiarities ascribed to the last 2 refer to the vessels in which they visited the shores of the barbarians. End of Part 1 of Chapter 2.
What? That's weird. I have another little thing here.
Section 27, Part 2 of Chapter 2 of Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. This is a LibriVox recording.
I think
All
it's just like
LibriVox
in the wrong
recordings are in the
spot.
public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Atlantis the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. Part 4, The Mythologies of the Old World, A Recollection of Atlantis. Chapter 2, Part 2, The Empire of Atlantis. The Empire of the Titans was clearly the Empire of Atlantis.
Okay, yeah, that's
The
what
most
happened.
judicious among our mythologists, says Dr. Rees, New British Cyclopedia, article Titans, such as Gerard Vossius, Marsham, Bocart, and Father Thomason, are of opinion that the partition of the world among the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, was the original of the tradition of the same partition among Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto, upon the breaking up of the great Empire of the Titans. The learned Pezron contends that the division which was made of this vast empire came, in after times, to be taken for the partition of the whole world, that Asia, remaining in the hands of Jupiter, Zeus, the most potent of the three brothers, made him looked upon as the god of Olympus, that the sea and islands which fell to Neptune occasioned their giving him the title of god of the sea, and that Spain, the extremity of the then known world, thought to be a very low country in respect of Asia, and famous for its excellent mines of gold and silver, failing to Pluto, occasioned him to be taken for the god of the infernal regions. We should suppose that Pluto possibly ruled over the transatlantic possessions of Atlantis and America, over those portions of the opposite continent, which Plato tells us were dominated by Atlas and his posterity, and which, being far beyond or below sunset, were the underworld of the ancients, while Atlantis, the Canaries, etc., constituted the island division, with Western Africa and Spain. Murray tells us, Mythology, page 58, that Pluto's share of the kingdom was supposed to lie in the remote west. The underworld of the dead was simply the world below the western horizon. The home of the dead has to do with that far west region where the sun dies at night. Anthropology, page 350. On the coast of Brittany, where Cape Raz stands out westward into the ocean, there is the Bay of Souls, the launching place where the departed spirits sail off across the sea. Ibid.
Wow.
In the like manner,
That's very
Odysseus found the land of the dead in the
Tolkien-esque.
ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules. There indeed was the land of the mighty dead, the grave of the drowned Atlanteans. However this be, continues Father Pezron, the empire of the Titans, according to the ancients, was very extensive. They possessed Phrygia, Thrace, a part of Greece, the island of Crete, and several other provinces to the inmost recesses of Spain. To these Sanchoniathon seems to join Syria, and Diodorus adds a part of Africa, and the kingdoms of Mauritania. The kingdoms of Mauritania embraced all that northwestern region of Africa nearest to Atlantis, in
This
which
is
are
where
the
the
Atlas
Richat
Mountains,
structure is,
and in
or
which, in the
Mali,
days of
around that area.
Herodotus, dwelt the
borders have
Atlantes.
probably changed a little.
Neptune or Poseidon says in answer to a message from Jupiter,
The
"No vassal
Atlas
god,
Mountains.
nor of his train am I. 3 brothers, deities, from Saturn came, and ancient Rhea, earth's immortal dame. Assigned by lot our triple rule we know. Infernal Pluto sways the shades below. Over the wide clouds and over the starry plain, ethereal Jove extends his high domain. My court beneath the hoary waves I keep, and hush the
That's
roaring
in the background
of
of
the
the
sacred
recording,
deep."
not me.
Iliad, Book 18. Homer alludes to Poseidon as the god whose liquid arms are hurled around the globe, whose earthquakes rock the world. Mythology tells us that when the Titans were defeated by Saturn, they retreated into the interior of Spain. Jupiter followed them up and beat them for the last time near Tartessus, and thus terminated a 10 years' war. Here we have a real battle on an actual battlefield. If we needed any further proof that the empire of the Titans was the empire of Atlantis, we would find it in the names of the Titans. Among these were Oceanus, Saturn or Kronos, and Atlas. They were all the sons of Uranus. Oceanus was at the base of the Greek mythology. Plato says, Dialogues, Timaeus, Vol. 2, page 533, Oceanus and Tethys were the children of earth and heaven, and from these sprung Horses, and Kronos, and Rhea, and many more with them. And from Kronos and Rhea sprung Zeus and Hera, and all those whom we know as the brethren, and others who were their children. In other words, all their gods came out of the ocean. They were rulers over some ocean realm. Cronos was the son of Oceanus, and Cronos was an Atlantean god, and from him the
Never heard
Atlantic
of that.
Ocean was called by the ancients the Cronian Sea.
Hmm.
The elder Minos was called the son of the ocean. He first gave civilization to the Cretans. He engraved his laws on brass, precisely as Plato tells us the laws of Atlantis were engraved on pillars of brass. The wanderings of Ulysses, as detailed in the Odyssey of Homer, are strangely connected with the Atlantic Ocean. The islands of the Phoenicians were apparently in mid-ocean. We dwell apart afar, within the unmeasured deep amid its waves. The most remote of men, no other race hath commerce with us. Odyssey, Book 6. The description of the Phaeacian walls, harbors, cities, palaces, ships, etc., seem like a recollection of Atlantis. The island of Calypso appears also to have been in the Atlantic Ocean, 20 days' sail from the Phaeacian Isles. And when Ulysses goes to the land of Pluto, the underworld, the home of the dead, he reached the far confines of Oceanus, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. It would be curious to inquire how far the poems of Homer are Atlantean in their relations and inspiration. Ulysses' wanderings were a prolonged struggle with Poseidon, the founder and god of Atlantis. The Hecatoncheires, or Cetimani, beings each with 100 hands, were 3 in number, Kotos, Gyges or Gaies,
I've never
and
heard those
Briareus,
words ever in my life.
and represented the frightful crashing of waves in its resemblance to the convulsions of earthquakes. Murray's Mythology, page 26. Are not these 100 arms the oars of the galleys, and the frightful crashing of the waves their movements in the water? The Cyclopes also were 3 in number.
No,
Brontes
I've heard of
with his
Minos.
thunder, Steropes with his lightning, and Arges with his stream of light. They were represented as having only one
Kotos,
eye, which was
Gyges,
placed at the
Gaius,
juncture
or
between the nose and
Briareus.
brow.
I've never heard of those.
It was, however, a large, flashing eye, as became beings who were personifications of the storm cloud, with its flashes of destructive lightning and peals of thunder. We shall show hereafter that the invention of gunpowder dates back to the days of the Phoenicians, and may have been derived by them from Atlantis. It is not impossible that in this picture of the Cyclopes we see a tradition of sea-going ships, with a light burning at the prow, and arms with some explosive preparation, which, with a roar like thunder, and a flash like lightning, destroyed those against whom it was employed. It at least requires less strain upon our credulity to suppose these monsters were a barbarian's memory of great ships than to believe that human beings ever existed, with 100 arms, and with one eye in the middle of their forehead, and giving out thunder and lightning. The
What is
natives of
going
the
on in the
West India
background of this?
Islands regarded the ships of Columbus as living creatures, and that their
Their
sails were wings.
What a gorgeous way of
Berosus
thinking about
tells
it.
us, speaking of the ancient days of Chaldea, in the first year there appeared from that part of the Erythraean Sea which borders Babylonia an animal endowed with reason, by name Oannes, whose whole body, according to the account of Apollodorus, was that of a fish; that under the fish's head he had another head, with feet also below, similar to those of a man, subjoined to the fish's tail. His voice too and language was articulate and human, and a representation of him is preserved even unto this day. This being was accustomed to pass the day among men, but took no food at that season, and he gave them an insight into letters and arts of all kinds. He taught them to construct cities, to found temples, to compile laws, and explain to them the principles of geometrical knowledge. He made them distinguish the seeds of the earth, and showed them how to collect the fruits. In short, he instructed them in everything which could tend to soften manners and humanize their laws. From that time nothing material has been added by way of improvement to his instructions. And when the sun set, this being, Oannes, retired again into the sea, and passed the night in the deep, for he was amphibious. After this there appeared other animals like Oannes. This is clearly the tradition preserved by a barbarous
Yeah, go
people
ahead, see
of
if
the
they
great
drop a link.
ships of a civilized nation, who colonized their coast and introduced the arts and sciences among them. And here we see the same tendency to represent the ship as a living thing, which converted the war vessels of the Atlanteans, the Cyclopes, into men with one blazing eye in the middle of the forehead. He married his sister Rhea, who bore him Pluto, Poseidon, Zeus, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. He anticipated that his sons would dethrone him as he had dethroned his father Uranus, and he swallowed his first 5 children, and would have swallowed the 6th child, Zeus, but that his wife Rhea deceived him with a stone image of the child, and Zeus was conveyed to the island of
Dumb
Crete,
guy to get
and there
fooled by
concealed
a
in a cave and
stone
raised to
thinking it was a
manhood.
baby. Probably deserved
Subsequently,
to get
Cronos,
dethroned.
yielded
Weird
back to the
ass.
light the children he had swallowed. This myth probably means that Cronos had his children raised in some secret place, where they could not be used by his enemies as the instruments of a rebellion against his throne. And the stone image of Zeus, palmed off upon him by Rhea, was probably some other child substituted for his own. His precautions seem to have been wise, for as soon as the children returned to the light, they commenced a rebellion, and drove the old gentleman from his throne. A rebellion of the Titans followed. The
Very
struggle
true.
was a
So did a
tremendous
lot
one,
of ancient
and seems to have been decided at last
the
by the use of gunpowder, as I shall.
Incas did this. It was pretty pervasive, very common. It's about purity of bloodlines. I guess they weren't too smart about incest type stuff. Obviously, the famous example is the Habsburgs, but this happened all over. Very, very common. The Polynesians, don't quote me on that, but I think the Polynesians did this as well. Very, very common.
Show farther on. We have seen Cronos identified with the Atlantic,
Definitely the
called
Habsburgs,
by the
definitely the
Romans the
Incas.
Cronian Sea. He was known to the Romans
Definitely
under
many
the
more.
name of Saturn, and ruled over a great Saturnian continent in the Western
that sounds
Ocean.
nice.
Saturn, or Cronos, came to Italy. He presented himself to the king Janus, and proceeded to instruct the
King
subjects of the
Janus?
latter in agriculture, gardening, and
Just think
many other
about Janus
arts then
from
quite unknown to
there's
them,
a show.
as for example how to tend and cultivate the vine. By such means he at length raised the people from a rude and comparatively barbarous condition to one of order and
Barbarous.
peaceful occupations, in consequence of which he was everywhere held in high esteem, and in course of time was selected by Janus to share with him the government of the country, which thereupon assumed the name of Saturnia, a land of seed and fruit. The period of Saturn's government was sung in later days by poets as a happy time, when sorrows were unknown, when innocence, freedom, and gladness reigned throughout the land in such a degree as to deserve the title of the Golden Age.
So did the
Murray's
pharaohs?
Mythology, page 32.
Was that all of the
All
dynasties,
this
or
accords
just
with
specific
Plato's
ones?
story. He tells us that the
It happened
rule of
all
the
over. I just don't
Atlanteans
want to
extended
name
to Italy,
specific ones that
and
I
that
don't
they were a
specifically remember.
civilized, agricultural, and commercial people. The civilization of Rome was
When I say
therefore an
Polynesians, I think I was
outgrowth
thinking of
directly
the
from the
Hawaiians
civilization of
specifically.
Atlantis.
Again, don't quote me on that one.
The Roman
But
Saturnalia
very, very common.
was a remembrance of the Atlantean colonization. It was a period of joy and festivity. Master and slave met as equals. The distinctions of poverty and wealth were forgotten. No punishments for crime were inflicted. Servants and slaves went about dressed in the clothes
Very
of their
good point,
masters,
Siba. Like that
and
comment.
children received presents from their parents or relatives. It was a time of jollity and mirth, a recollection of the Golden Age.
Yeah,
We
don't
find
mess
a
with our
reminiscence of it
boats.
in the Roman carnival.
And more
The third
importantly,
and
our
last
sailors.
on the throne of the highest god was Zeus. We shall see him a little farther on, by the aid of some mysterious engine overthrowing the rebels, the Titans, who rose against his power amid the flash of lightning and the roar of thunder. He was called the Thunderer, and the Mighty Thunderer. He was represented with thunderbolts in his hand and an eagle at his feet. During the time of Zeus, Atlantis seems to have reached its greatest height of power. He was recognized as the father of the whole world. He everywhere rewarded uprightness, truth, faithfulness, and kindness. He was merciful to the poor and punished the cruel. To illustrate his rule on earth, the following story is told. Philemnon and Baucis, an aged couple of the poorer class, were living peacefully and full of piety towards the gods in their cottage in Phrygia, when Zeus, who often visited the earth disguised, to inquire into the behavior of men, paid a visit, in passing through Phrygia on such a journey, to these poor old people, and was received by them very kindly as a weary traveler, which he pretended to be. Bidding him welcome to the house, they set about preparing for their guest, who was accompanied by Hermes, as excellent a meal as they could afford, and for this purpose were about to kill the only goose they had left, when Zeus interfered, for he was touched by their kindliness and genuine piety, and that all the more because he had observed among the other inhabitants of the district nothing but cruelty of disposition and a habit of reproaching and despising the gods. To punish this conduct, he determined to visit the country with a flood, but to save from it Philemon and Baucis, the good aged couple, and to reward them in a striking manner. To this end he revealed himself to them before opening the gates of the great flood, transformed their poor cottage on the hill into a splendid temple, installed the aged pair as his priest and priestess, and granted their prayer that they might both die together. When after many years death overtook them, they were changed into two trees that grew side by side in the
So
neighborhood.
just a note on
An oak
that, the Star of David, before being a symbol of Judaism, was much. It was common in other cultures as well. So I wouldn't even call it at first thought. If I'm correct, I could be wrong here, but I wouldn't even call it a Star of David in the sense that like it was probably like pre that being used as a Star of David. I could be wrong on this, but I don't think that this was the same symbol. It's probably rooted in the same. The word appropriated is like a dirty word, but it's the Star of Rephaim. Thank you. That's likely what it is. It's probably just that the Barbary pirates probably, I'm not saying this for sure, came from the same source as where the Star of David was taken from.
oak and a linden. Murray's Mythology, page 38. Here we have another reference to the flood, and another identification with Atlantis. Zeus was a kind of Henry VIII, and took to himself a number of wives. By Demeter, Ceres, he had Persephone, Proserpine.
Thank you, Blue Frost. Is
By
that
Leto,
correct?
Apollo and Artemis, Diana. By Dione, Aphrodite, Venus. By Semele, Dionysus, Bacchus. By Maya, Hermes, Mercury. By Alcmene, Hercules, etc., etc. We have thus the whole family of gods and goddesses traced back to Atlantis. Hera or Juno was the first and principal wife of Zeus. There were numerous conjugal rows between the royal pair, in which, say the poets, Juno was generally to blame. She was naturally jealous of the
What's
other
up,
wives
Dr.
of
Strange
Zeus.
Doom? Good to have you.
Zeus on one occasion beat her, and threw her son Hephaestus out of Olympus. On another occasion he hung her out of Olympus with her arms tied and two great weights attached to her feet. A very brutal and ungentlemanly trick. But the Greeks transposed this into a beautiful symbol. The two weights, they say, represent the earth and sea, an illustration of how all the phenomena of the visible sky were supposed to hang dependent on the highest god of heaven. Ibid, page 47. Juno probably regarded the transaction in an altogether different light, and she therefore united with Poseidon, the king's brother, and his daughter Athena, in a rebellion to put the old fellow in a straitjacket, and would have succeeded had not Thetis brought to his aid the sea giant Aegeon, probably a warship. She seems in the main, however, to
Okay,
have been
I'm gonna keep going with this for a little bit. We'll say probably another hour. I'll be back in like 5 minutes, okay? And I think you guys know exactly what that means. Oh, this is not the right one. I need the 24-hour version. Not that I'm gonna play it for 24 hours, but it's muted. It's muted. Why are you muted? Don't do this to me. Our 10-hour version. Okay, I'll be right back. I will be right back. Okay, no more crab raid. Back to it.
Been a good wife, and was the type of all the womanly virtues. Poseidon, the first king of Atlantis, according to Plato, was, according to Greek mythology, a brother of Zeus and a son of Cronos. In the division of the kingdom he fell heir to the ocean and its islands, and to the navigable rivers. In other words, he was king of a maritime and commercial people. His symbol was the horse. He was the first to train and employ horses. That is to say, his people first domesticated the horse. This agrees with what Plato tells us of the importance attached to the horse in Atlantis, and of the baths and race courses provided for him. He was worshipped in the island of Tenos
Oh, everyone
in the
leaves every time I
character
take a
of a
break. That
physician,
sucks. Not
showing
everyone.
that he
Thank you for still
represented
being
an
here.
advanced civilization. He was also master of an agricultural people. The ram with the golden fleece for which the Argonauts sailed was the offspring of Poseidon. He carried in his hand a three-pronged symbol, the trident, doubtless an emblem of the three continents that were embraced in the empire of Atlantis. He founded many colonies along the shores of the Mediterranean. He helped to build the walls of Troy, the tradition thus tracing the Trojan civilization to an Atlantean source. He settled Attica and founded Athens, named
Wonderful.
after his
Thank
niece
you.
Athena,
Still being
daughter
here.
of Zeus, who had no mother, but had sprung from the head of Zeus, which
Oh,
probably
it was
signifies that
like
her mother's
30,
name
and
was
now we're
not
at 21,
known.
which is
She was
okay.
a
I understand.
foundling. Athena caused the first olive tree to grow on the
Ooh,
Acropolis
glad.
of Athens,
If you don't
parent
mind,
of all the olive trees of Greece.
what's everyone doing right
Poseidon
now? What's
seems to
everyone
have
do for
had
work? If you
settlements
want to
at
share.
Corinth, Aegina, Nikos, and Delphi. Temples were erected to his honor in nearly all the seaport towns of Greece. He sent a sea monster, to wit, a slip, to ravage part of the Trojan territory. In the Iliad, Poseidon appears as ruler of the sea, inhabiting a brilliant palace in its depths,
Gunsmith. That's
traversing
awesome.
its surface in a chariot, or stirring the powerful billows until the earth shakes as they crash upon the shores. He is also associated with well-watered plains and valleys. Murray's Mythology, page 51. The palace in the depths of the sea was the palace upon Olympus in Atlantis. The traversing of the sea referred to the movements of a mercantile race. The shaking of the earth was an association with earthquakes. The well-watered plains and valleys remind us of the great plain of Atlantis described by Plato. All the traditions of the coming of civilization into Europe point to Atlantis. For instance, Kelios, who lived at
Let's see what this
Eleusis,
got.
near Athens, hospitably received Demeter, the Greek Ceres, the daughter of Poseidon, when she landed, and in return she taught him the use of the plough, and presented his son with the seed of barley, and sent him out to teach mankind how to sow and utilize that grain. Dionysus, grandson of Poseidon, traveled through all the known world, even into the remotest parts of India, instructing the people as he proceeded how
Kitchen
to tend the
manager,
vine and how to practice many other arts of
farmer,
peace,
rancher.
besides teaching them the
Fantastic.
value of just and honorable
And L.
dealings.
Oh, I thought you said
Murray's
LT, like a
Mythology,
lieutenant.
page
IT.
119.
Okay.
The Greeks
Probably a good
celebrated great
podcast for
festivals
you.
in his honor down to the coming of Christianity.
My nose
The
is
nymphs
running.
of Grecian mythology
Okay,
were a
just got
kind of
dust in
middle
it doing
beings
yard work
between the
earlier.
gods and men, communicating with both, loved and respected by both, living like gods on
What are you talking
ambrosia.
about, Raccoon? What
In
do you mean?
extraordinary cases, they
You
were
raise
summoned,
gods
it
from
was
the dead. What does that
believed,
mean?
to the councils of the Olympian gods, but they usually remained in their particular spheres, in secluded grottos and peaceful valleys, occupied in spinning, weaving, bathing, singing sweet songs, dancing, sporting, or accompanying deities who passed through their territories, hunting with Artemis Diana, rushing about with Dionysus Bacchus, making merry with Apollo or Hermes Mercury, but always in a hostile attitude towards
Is
the
a long
wanton and
road.
excited satyrs. The nymphs were plainly the female inhabitants of Atlantis, dwelling on the plains, while the aristocracy lived on the higher lands, and this is confirmed by the fact that part of them were called the Atlantids, offspring of
Taking
Atlantis.
drugs?
The
No.
Hesperides were also daughters of Atlas. Their mother was
I'm gonna stop for a moment to announce that. What time am I? Me and Dan. I know we have a lot of different time zones here, so I will say an hour and 20 minutes from right now. I'll probably cut this stream off in about 45 minutes. Take a little bit of a break, and Dunking Dan is coming on the channel at what is 10 p.m. my time, 2200 my time. Yeah, the sniffing. I understand what you're saying. That like I just went and snorted cocaine, but that is not what happened. I promise you. I would be more careful if that's what I was doing, but yeah, I'm not. I it feels in my nose like there's dust in my nose. Not drug dust, but like dust from I was leaf blowing right before this. Gosh, where did this come from? I gotta blow my nose. So 1 second. Sorry. I really hope my mic didn't pick that up. Yeah. That was an exhale. No, not angel dust. See, this is not going to help the accusations I got of doing meth because I had that nervous tick and 12 milligrams of Xinin when I was on when I was on Jimmy Corsetti. No, the only drugs I do are nicotine. I barely drink alcohol anymore, and I used to smoke a lot of weed, and I really don't really do that anymore. That's not true. It depends. I'm in Connecticut right now. I sometimes smoke weed in Pennsylvania, but here I don't have any weed, and I could get it. It's legal here. I could get it if I wanted it. But I don't care. I just don't care. It's one of those things that I'll do. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Caffeine. I love caffeine and I love nicotine. But that's it. That's it. No, I do not recommend anybody do DMT. I mean, look, you got to make that decision for yourself. I've never done DMT. I've done some other hallucinogens in the past, not for years. Look, drugs are drugs. They're just like anything else. It's certain drugs like heroin, whatever. You don't need to hear me rant about drugs. Let's just keep going. Point is, yeah, caffeine, nicotine, some weed, but like I don't think smoking a lot of weed is a good idea. It's not a good thing, I don't think, for anybody. But yeah, caffeine and nicotine help build the West. Actually, I do have an old podcast episode about drugs in different cultures, which I think is pretty good, which I'm eventually going to turn into a standalone video. I just got to get a better workflow for it. All right, let's go. Yeah. Dedunking, 1 hour, 15 minutes from right now, dedunking. We're going to keep going with this a little bit, probably 1 or 2 more chapters. And then, yeah.
Hesperus,
Too much
a
of anything is
personification
bad.
of the region of the West. Their home was an island in the
mushrooms
ocean
are great.
off the north
Well,
or
I
west
shouldn't
coast
say
of
that.
Africa.
It's contextual. It can
And
be
here
very
we find
bad for you if you have the wrong
tradition,
mindset.
which not only points to Atlantis, but also shows some kinship to the legend in Genesis of the tree and the serpent. Titaea,
What, you think
a
cannabis
goddess
is
of the
good?
earth,
I think a
gave
lot of it is
Zeus
bad.
a
I
tree
think some of
bearing
it is
golden
fine.
apples on it. This tree was put in the care of the Hesperides, but they could not resist the temptation to pluck and eat its fruit.
Also with
Thereupon a
mushrooms,
serpent
just
named Ladon
psilocybin.
was put
That
to watch the
Amanita
tree.
muscaria shit is
Hercules
bad
slew the
news.
serpent and gave the
I know it's not
apples
very
to the
common, but if you ever
Hesperides.
get your... It's not the same
Heracles,
thing. Don't do that.
Hercules,
Ever.
we have seen, was a son of Zeus, king of Atlantis.
T.
One of his 12 labors, the 10th, was the carrying off of the cattle of Geryon. The meaning
Oh,
of
yeah.
Geryon is the
100%
red glow
dildo.
of the
I don't think weed's
sunset.
bad.
He dwelt on the island of Erythea in the remote west, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Hercules took a ship, and after encountering a storm, reached the island and placed himself on Mount Abas. Hercules killed Geryon, stole the cattle, put them on the ship, and landed them safely, driving them through Iberia, Gaul, and
Dude,
over the Alps down into
not good.
Italy.
Okay, I'm literally going to... Do not. Amanita muscaria is bad news. Do not do Amanita muscaria. Ever. Look, you get to make your own decision. Everyone watching this is an adult. We don't have any teenage watchers. We barely have anybody 18 to 24. But for the love of God, Amanita muscaria is not good at all.
Murray's Mythology, page 257. This was simply the memory of a cattle raid made by an uncivilized race upon the civilized cattle-raising people of Atlantis. It is not necessary to pursue the study of the gods of Greece any farther. They were simply barbarian recollections of the rulers of a great civilized people,
Where
who
are
in
you
the
sending
early
me this
days
stuff,
visited
Raccoon?
their shores
No,
and brought with them the arts of peace. Here then, in
Nancy,
conclusion, are
do
the
not
proofs
do
of our
Amanita
proposition
muscaria. No.
that the gods of Greece
Look
have
up
been
some
the
of the
kings
effects
of
of it.
Atlantis. 1.
Also, on marijuana, while we're talking about drugs, they're like, number one, marijuana is 100% physically addictive if you do enough of it. It 100% is. People say it's not. It totally is. Absolutely. In the past, I have smoked a lot of weed, and I can tell you firsthand, and I've looked into it a little bit, and that's absolutely true. Amanita muscaria is bad news. Marijuana, if you have I'm 29 now, so if I like at this point in my life, if I had a propensity for schizophrenia, it would have already shown itself. So that's not true, but marijuana can absolutely, just smoking weed can induce psychosis in the wrong person. Also, edibles are not the same thing, processed by our liver. Absolutely not the same thing. And like the other thing, the like oils and everything, that's pretty not great as well.
They were not the makers, but the rulers of the world. 2. They were human in their attributes. They loved, sinned, and fought battles, the very sites of which are given. They founded cities and civilized the people of the shores of the Mediterranean. 3. They dwelt upon an island in the Atlantic, in the remote west, where the sun shines after it has ceased to shine on Greece. 4. The land was destroyed in a deluge. 5. They were ruled over by Poseidon and Atlas. 6. Their empire extended to Egypt and Italy and the shores of Africa, precisely as stated by Plato. 7. They existed during the Bronze Age and at the beginning of the Iron Age. The entire Greek mythology is the recollection by a degenerate race of a vast, mighty, and highly civilized empire.
What does that mean?
Which in a remote past covered large parts of Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. End of Chapter 2 of Part 4.
What does that mean, a degenerate race? I don't even have that.
Section 29,
That's
Part
not
4,
even in
Chapter
this
3
copy.
of Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola
What
Donnelly.
is this?
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain.
Nancy, that's racist.
For more information or to volunteer,
that's
please
very
visit
racist.
LibriVox.org. Recording by Laurie Kennard of Winding Roads Books and More. Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. Part 4, The Mythologies of the Old World, A Recollection of Atlantis. Chapter 3, The Gods of the Phoenicians, also Kings of Atlantis. Not alone were the gods of the Greeks, the deified kings of Atlantis, but we find that the mythology of the Phoenicians was drawn from the same source. For instance, we find in the Phoenician cosmogony that the Titans, Rephaim, derived their origin from the Phoenician gods Agris and Acritus.
I actually want to know, like, that didn't show up in my written copy, I don't think. But like, I don't know why. Some of the ends of these chapters aren't showing up, but I don't know what degenerate means. Wait till you hear what they thought of the Irish in the 1880s. Yeah, I've seen it. It's not good. A lot of like people today, they argue that like the Irish were never discriminated against in the U.S. That is 100% grade A bullshit. Absolutely not true. They absolutely were discriminated against. I should say we, I guess, because like that's me, or at least at the time, like my ancestors, who were, some of them were in America at that point, absolutely were discriminated against. It's not like, and you know, I'm American, right? But like the they wouldn't have seen it that way. They wouldn't have seen it that way at all.
This connects the Phoenicians with that island in the remote west, in the midst of ocean where, according to the Greeks, the Titans dwelt. According to Sanchoniathon, Uranos
not good,
was
but
the
hilarious
son of
is
Autochthon,
right.
and according to Plato, Autochthon was one of the 10 kings of Atlantis. He married his sister Ge. He is the Uranos of the Greeks,
Great.
who was the
More
son of Gaia,
sister
the
marrying.
earth, whom he married.
Love to hear it.
The Phoenicians tell us Uranos had by Ge 4 sons, Ilus, El, who is called Kronos, and Betulus, Bethel, and Dagon, which signifies bread corn, and Atlas, Tammuz. Here again we have the names of 2 other kings of Atlantis. These 4 sons probably represented 4 races, the offspring of the earth. The Greek Uranos was the father of Kronos and the ancestor of Atlas. The Phoenician god Uranos had a great many other wives. His wife Ge was jealous. They quarreled, and he attempted to kill the children he had by her. This is the legend which the Greeks told of Zeus and Juno. In the Phoenician mythology,
like the
Kronos
video,
raised a
please,
rebellion
and
against
subscribe
Uranos,
if you're not. Hit that
and after a
notification
great battle
bell.
dethroned him. In the Greek legends, it is Zeus who attacks and overthrows his father Kronos. Uranos had a daughter called Astarte Ashtoreth, another called Rhea. And Dagon, after he had found out bread corn in the plow, was called Zeus Erotrius. We find also in the Phoenician legends mention made of Poseidon, founder and king of Atlantis. Cronos gave Attica to his daughter Athena, as in the Greek legends. In a time of plague, he sacrificed his son to Uranos and circumcised himself and compelled his allies to do
Why
the
would you do
same
that?
thing.
Why would you do
It
that to
would thus
yourself?
appear that this singular
Good
rite,
Lord.
practiced as we have seen by the Atlantidae of the Old and New Worlds, the Egyptians, the Phoenicians,
Did he just say that the Atlantidae, I'm assuming that means, can someone correct me if they know otherwise, that means somebody, an Atlantean, someone from Atlantis? The Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Hebrew, the Egyptians, the Mexicans, and the Red Men of America. The Mexicans and the Red Men of America? What does that mean? Dates back as we might have expected? They circumcised? Okay. The Jews stole circumcision. I would say in this case, not stole, but adopting a cultural practice is appropriating. And again, appropriating is a dirty word today, but it's completely standard in world history. Culture is by definition shared. It is by definition ever changing. You always adopt new things from other people. But I know you were joking, but just saying that. So circumcision comes from Atlantis. And I didn't realize all these people did this. That's very weird to have genital mutilation, which is what it is. Didn't circumcision start with Abraham? That's what I thought. I don't know. But like, of course, there's like, a lot of these stories are adopted in. Like, for example, the story of Passover in the Jewish religion, that wasn't the Hebrews. There's no record. There's no archaeological record of the of Hebrews ever being enslaved in, or there's no record of them ever existing in Egypt. So that was some. If that story is real, there's some truth to indigenous myths always. But like, if that ever happened, it was some farther back people that did that. So. That's very strange. I didn't know about circumcision. I'm marking it down. I'm not even going to be able to check all these claims that I'm doing, but I'm going to look through them to look at the most interesting things.
the Hebrews, the Ethiopians, the Mexicans, and the Red Men of America dates
I don't
back,
understand
as
what he
we
means
might
by
have
Mexicans.
expected, to Atlantis.
I don't
Cronos
understand.
visits the different regions of
Does
the
he mean
habitable
Aztecs?
world. He gave Egypt as a kingdom to the god Tot, who had invented the alphabet. The Egyptians called him Thoth, and he was represented among them as the god of letters, the clerk of the underworld, bearing a tablet, pen, and palm branch. This not only connects the Phoenicians with Atlantis, but shows the relations of
That's good to
Egyptian
know.
civilization to both Atlantis and the Phoenicians.
Oh, the
There can be no
Atlantides?
doubt
Okay.
that the royal personages who formed the gods of Greece were also the
I
gods
love
of
Year One.
Phoenicians.
Year One is
We have
so
seen
good.
the
I might watch
Autochthon
that
of Plato
tonight.
reappearing in the Autochthon of
Maya.
the Phoenicians,
Okay.
the Atlas of Plato in the Atlas of the Phoenicians,
That's why it's so
the
hard
Poseidon
to
of
listen to this
Plato
old
and the
stuff.
Poseidon of the Phoenicians, while the kings Mestor and Menecius of Plato are probably the gods Misor and Amynus.
Also, I should say, like, I love the Maya. Obviously, got this Mayan stuff behind me. I love the Mayans. The Aztecs were a much shorter-lived culture. They were, similar to the Greek, how like the Greeks and Romans have like there's a Greek version of a god and a Roman version of a god. Same thing with like the Mayan and the Aztec, and it goes back to like the Olmecs and other progenitor cultures. The Maya existed for a lot longer than the Aztecs. The Aztecs, they were not going to survive. They were not going to be around much longer, even if the Europeans took them out, even without the Spanish taking them out, just because of how they were the Assyrians of Central America. They would have eventually been taken over. If there was a time when something happened that there was a way to stop the Aztecs, which is inevitable over a long enough time period, few hundred years, they would have just got taken out, just like the Assyrians. Optiplier, stop giving me money, man. You don't have to do that. Some evidence the Hebrews were in Egypt there was a group called the Hebrew who were in the region, and of course the Hyksos. Both were names mean something similar to what Hebrew means, wanderer. Yeah, so when I say that, I'm talking about like I would have to look back at this because I haven't in a little while, but like when I'm saying that, it's like I think my interpretation of it, and I was mostly relying on what the archaeological papers said, was that it's like, these were like pre-Hebrew cultures, like progenitor cultures of the Hebrews, yes, but not the Hebrews. Yeah,
of the Phoenicians. Sanchoniathon tells
Hibaru
us,
as
after
opposed to
narrating
Subaru.
all the
Love my Subaru.
discoveries by which the people advanced to civilization, that the Kabiri set down their records of the past by the command of the god Tot. And they delivered them to their successors and to foreigners, of whom one was Osiris, the inventor of the three letters, the brother of Cua, who is called the first Phoenician. Lenormand and Chevalier, Ancient History of the East, Volume 2, page 228. This would show that the first Phoenician came long after this line of the kings or gods, and that he was a foreigner, as compared with them, and therefore that it could not have been the Phoenicians proper who made the several inventions narrated by Sanchoniathon, but some other race, from whom the Phoenicians might have been descended. And in the delivery of their records to the foreigner Osiris, the god of Egypt, we have another evidence that Egypt derived her civilization from Atlantis. Max Mueller says, the Semitic languages also are all varieties of one form of speech. Though we do not know that primitive language from which the Semitic dialects diverged, yet we know that at one time such language must have existed.
Right.
We cannot derive Hebrew from Sanskrit
Semitic.
or Sanskrit from Hebrew, but we can well understand how both may have proceeded from one common source. They are
Yeah, he's
both
talking about
channels supplied
stuff
from one
that's been
river,
figured out in
and they carry,
linguistics
though
since
not
then, I
always
think.
on the surface, floating materials
Or
of
maybe
language
it
which
hasn't been
challenge
answered, but
comparison,
the
and have
idea is
already
more-
yielded satisfactory results to careful analyzers.
The
Outlines of
methods are more
Philosophy of
established.
History, Volume 1, page 475. There was an ancient tradition among the Persians that the Phoenicians migrated from the shores of the Erythraean Sea, and this has been supposed to mean the Persian Gulf. But there was a very old city of Erythea, in utter ruin in the time of Strabo, which was built in some ancient age, long before the founding of Gades, near the site of that town, on the Atlantic coast of Spain. May not this town of Erythea have given its name to the adjacent sea? And this may have been the starting point of the Phoenicians in their European migrations. It would even appear that there was an island of Erythea. In the Greek mythology, the 10th labor of Hercules consisted in driving away the cattle of Geryon, who lived in the island of Erythea, an island somewhere in the remote west beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Murray's Mythology, page 257. Hercules stole the cattle from this remote oceanic island, and returning, drove them through Iberia, Gaul, over the Alps, and through Italy. I bid.
That does not match up with
It
what I
is
know about
probable that a
auroch
people emigrating from the
domestication, unless
Erythraean
they're talking
Sea,
about something
that
else.
is, from the Atlantic, first gave their name to a town on the coast of Spain, and at a later date to the Persian Gulf,
Ah,
as we have seen the name of York carried from England to the banks of the
I'm
Hudson,
not beating the
and
cocaine
then to the Arctic
allegations.
Circle. The builders of the Central American cities are reported to have been a bearded race. The Phoenicians, in common with the Indians, practiced human sacrifices to a great extent. They worshipped fire and water, adopted the names of the animals whose skins they wore, that is to say, they had the totemic system,
I need to not blow. I need
telegraphed
to
by
not
means of
leaf
fires,
blow before
poisoned
I
their
do
arrows,
this.
offered peace before beginning battle, and used drums.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go blow my nose again and grab my Zins. 30 seconds. Don't leave. Don't leave. Don't do it. Or do. I'm not your dad. Like the video. That is not enough time to do a line. I did not mean for that to rhyme or that. God damn it.
Bancroft's Native Races, Volume 5, page 77. The extent of country covered by the commerce of the Phoenicians represents to some degree the area
where
of
did
the
you
old
send this to me,
Atlantean
Reckon?
Empire. Their colonies and trading posts
Is that what he
extended
meant
east
by
and west
degenerate? They ate
from the
their
shores
people?
of the Black Sea through the Mediterranean to the west coast of Africa and of Spain and around to Ireland and England, while from north to south they ranged from the Baltic to the Persian Gulf. They touched every point where civilization in later ages made its appearance. Strabo estimated that they had 300 cities along the west coast of Africa. When Columbus sailed to discover a new world, or rediscover an old one, he took his departure from a Phoenician seaport, founded by that great race 2,500 years previously. This Atlantean sailor, with his Phoenician features, sailing from an Atlantean port, simply reopened the path of commerce and colonization, which had been closed when Plato's island sunk in the sea. And it is a curious fact that Columbus had the antediluvian.
You know what I hate right now? All that talk about drugs. I really want to smoke some weed right now. I'm not going to. I'd have to go drive and get weed. Maybe I'll end the stream right now before. No, I'm just kidding. I'll keep going.
World in his mind's eye even then, for when he reached the mouth of the Orinoco, he thought it was the river Gihon that flowed out of paradise, and he wrote home to Spain, "There are here great indications suggesting the proximity of the earthly paradise.
Appreciate
For not
that,
only
Paul.
does it
That'll do it
correspond
for
in
me.
mathematical position with the opinions of the holy and learned theologians, but all other signs concur to make it probable." Sanchoniathon claims that the learning of Egypt, Greece, and Judea was derived from the Phoenicians.
I haven't seen that, Lisa.
It would appear probable that while other races represent the conquests or colonizations of Atlantis,
Thank you.
the Phoenicians succeeded
What are you
to
smoking?
their arts,
You're Turkish. What do they
sciences,
smoke
and
over there?
especially
Hash?
their commercial supremacy, and hence the close resemblances which we have found to exist between the Hebrews, a branch of the
I
Phoenician
used to.
stock,
There's
and
old
the people
videos of me
America.
smoking weed. I stopped doing it on camera.
Upon the Syrian
I think it's
Sea,
a bad
the people
look,
live,
and I don't really
who
smoke
style
anymore that
themselves
much.
Phoenicians. These were the first great founders of the world, founders of cities and of mighty states, who showed a path through seas before unknown.
What is this? If only you had G3 number 2 white extra strong tier. Right now, you reminded me. This good old Scandinavian nicotine delivery system and my tattoo. Boing, 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 boing. Okay, back to the reading.
In the first ages, when the sons of men knew not which way to turn them, they assigned to each his first department.
Oh, you're
They
in the
bestowed
UK.
of land a
No, that
portion,
weed's crap,
and of
man.
sea
I've
a
had
lot,
UK weed.
and sent each
We got way
wandering
better
tribe
weed in
far
Canada
off
and the
to
US.
share a different soil and climate. Hence arose the great diversity so plainly seen, mid nations widely severed. Dionysius of Susiana, A.D. 3.
Oof.
End of Part 4, Chapter 3. Recording by Laurie Kennard, www.windingroadsbooks.com.
Yeah,
Section
I mean,
30,
I didn't
Part
know if you
4,
guys did or not,
Chapter
but
4 of Atlantis the
Zinn is a
Antediluvian World
Scandinavian company,
by
at least.
Ignatius Loyola Donnelly. This is a LibriVox recording.
Yes.
All LibriVox recording.
Colorado, British Columbia, Pacific Northwest, but that's British Columbia. Pacific Northwest also includes British Columbia, which is a Canadian province if you're not from North America. Best weed.
Are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Atlantis the Antediluvian World, Part 4, The Mythologies of the Old World, A Recollection of Atlantis.
That BC
Chapter
bud.
4, The God Odin, Woden, or Wotan. In the Scandinavian mythology, the chief god was Odin, the Woden, Wotan, or Wutan of the Germans. He is represented with many of the attributes of the Greek god Zeus, and is supposed by some to be identical with him. He dwelt with the 12 Aesir, or gods, upon Asgard, the Norse Olympus,
Hell yeah, Altenplier.
which
Good to have you.
arose out of Midgard, a land halfway between the
Don't
regions
don't
of
keep
frost
giving me
and
money,
fire,
man, please. And I'm not
to wit,
saying
in the
that to
temperate
prompt you to
climate.
do it. You
The
don't have to do
Scandinavian
that.
Olympus was probably Atlantis. Odin is represented as a grave-looking elderly man with a long beard,
Yeah,
carrying
screw
in
that.
his hand a spear, and accompanied by 2 dogs and 2 ravens. He was the father of poetry and the inventor of runic writing. The Chiapenese of
Base.
Central America, the
Where in
people
the
whose
UK are
language we
you?
have seen furnishing such
I
remarkable
mean, you don't have to
resemblances
tell me
to
if you don't
Hebrew,
want to share, but
claim to have been the first people of the New World. Clavigero tells us, History Antiqua del Mexico, English translation 1807, Volume 1, that according to the traditions
Syringe.
of the Chiapenese, There was a
Ugh.
Votan who was the grandson of the man who built the ark to save himself and family from the deluge.
True Doctor Strange doom.
He was one of those who
Also, redheads are seemingly like, people make like, they make like, they talk a lot about how like white people get replaced in movies, but heavily disproportionately redheads getting replaced in movies. And, they made Annie black. What the heck is that, man? Annie, Little Orphan Annie. She's like, you can't do that to Annie. That's crazy, man. Annie's got to be a redhead. What the heck is going on? I don't care that they made her black. Like any other red. Like they couldn't make her a blonde girl. That's just as messed up. It's wrong. It's wrong. Oh yeah, I love Edinburgh.
undertook to build the tower that
One of my
should
favorite
reach to
cities in
heaven.
the world, man. Great city.
The Lord ordered him to people America.
Yes.
He came from the east.
I
He brought 7 families.
look, this is conspiracy, but like I think that there is a concerted effort to attack redheads. I really think that for some reason somebody's got it out for redheads. For some reason, there's just too many cases, way too many.
Families with him. He had been preceded in America by 2 others, Ig and Imox. He built a great city in America called Nachan, city of the serpents. The serpent that tempted Eve was called Nahash, from his own race, which was named Chan, a serpent. This Nachan is supposed to have been Palenque. The date of his journey is placed in the legends in the year 3000 of the world.
I'm not a redhead,
in
but
the
if my
10th
beard gets
century
long
BC.
enough, it's red. My
He
hair's
also
blonde.
founded 3 tributary monarchies, whose
Dangerous
capitals were
absol-
Tulan,
okay.
Mayapan, and Chickamauga. He wrote a book containing a history of his deeds and proofs that he belonged to the tribe of Chanes, serpents. He states that he is the third of the Votans, that he conducted 7 families from Valan Votan to this continent, and assigned lands to them, that he determined to travel until he came to the root of heaven and found his relations, the Culebres, and made himself known to them, that he accordingly made 4 voyages to Chivim, that he arrived in Spain, that he went to Rome,
very important
that he saw the
to
house of
Central
God
America,
building,
Maya,
that he went
Aztec.
by the road which his brethren the Culebres had bored, that he marked it, and that he passed by the house of the 13 Culebres. He relates that in returning from one of his voyages he found 7 other families of the Tzikal nation, who had joined the first inhabitants and recognized in them the same origin as his own, that is, of the Culebres.
Why do you know what
He
color
speaks of the
pubes he
place where they
has,
built the
dude?
first town, which from its founders received the name of Tzikal. He affirms that, having taught them the refinement of manners and the use of the table, tablecloths, dishes, basins, cups, and napkins,
A little bit, Nancy.
they
Not a
taught
lot,
him
but
the
a little
knowledge
bit.
of God and his worship, his first ideas of a king, and obedience to him, that he was chosen captain
Wait,
of all
who's
these
they? Who
united
says
families.
Muhammad was a redhead? I've never heard that.
It is probable that Spain and Rome are interpolations. Cabrera claims that the Votanites were Carthaginians. He thinks the Chivin of Votan were the Hivim or Givim, who were descendants of Heth, son of Canaan, Phoenicians. They were the builders of Acheron, Azotus, Ascalon, and Gaza.
Oh, I didn't
The
realize
scriptures
you
refer to them as Hivites.
you'd been in the UK
Givim,
for that long.
in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 32, and Joshua chapter 13, verse 4.
Jesus was a redhead. I thought he was blonde.
He claims that Cadmus and his wife Hermione were of this stock, and
Muhammad
according
was a
to
ginger.
Ovid, they were
Huh.
metamorphosed into snakes, Culebres.
What? Oh,
The
that's
name Hivites and Phoenicians
to read the
signifies a
Quran.
snake. Woden may not
rest
possibly
of
have
the
passed
Bible.
into Europe. He may have traveled altogether in Africa. His singular allusion to a way which the Culebres had bored seems at first inexplicable.
There's also like, I mean, you go out to Afghanistan and Iran, and there are some people with red beards naturally. There could be an unknown vibrational benefit to having wisdom teeth. This comment section is just way too interesting. I gotta listen to the freaking book, but Muhammad is a redhead. Some Muslims would dye their hair and beards ginger. Huh. Interesting.
But Dr. Livingstone's last letters, published 8th November, 1869, in the Proceedings of the Royal Geographical Society, mention that tribes live in underground houses in Rua. Some excavations
That's okay.
are said
We have
to be 30
a
miles long
a Turk
and
here
have running rills in them.
who
A whole
is
district can
corroborating
stand a
it, so I
siege
think
in
we're
them.
safe.
The writings therein I have been told by some of the people are drawings
Safe
of
as in
animals
safe
and not
that it's
letters.
accurate.
Otherwise, I should have gone to see them.
Yeah.
People,
We should say this. Like, this isn't talked about a lot, but like, the freaking, like, a lot of Arabs are like, they're very, however, like genetically very, very similar to Europeans. Genghis Khan was ginger. The hell? You guys are messing with me right now. Absolutely. Yours is natural. Red beard. My beard, I don't like having a long beard, but if I did, it does come in red, which I love. I love the look of that, but I don't like the look of a long beard, so I don't do it. But yeah. Many Lebanese have red hair. Yeah, a lot of them. I've seen that. It's the same traits are there. Yes, right. Caucasoid. Arabs were classified as they are Caucasoid. Even on the U.S. Census, they're considered white. I mean, what else are you gonna call them? It's just like it's just prejudice that prejudice not just from like traditional racists, but also like anybody else that like says like, oh, they must be different from us because they're Muslim or whatever. Like, no, they're genetically. Like, I'm pretty sure genetically, I'd have to look at it more, and I don't know genetics that well, but the difference between like an Irish and a Spanish person, isn't that much different from the difference between an Irish and a freaking Arab. It depends, but yes, in Iran and some of the ethnic groups in Afghanistan are also they're Iranic ethnic groups, and they are, yeah. Iran means the land of the Aryans. I was arguing with some white supremacists on Twitter the other day, and I was explaining to them that the Iranians were Aryans, and somebody asked me for a source. You want me to give you a source that Aryans, the land of the Aryans. You want me to give you a source that they're Aryans? That's what you want me to do, moron?
very dark, well made, an outer angle of eye slanting inward. And Captain Grant, who accompanied Captain Speke in his famous exploration of the sources of the Nile,
Yeah, redhead genes are
tells
also
of a tunnel or
associated with
subway
pain
under the
tolerance.
river Kayoma, on the highway between Luemba and Marunga, near Lake Tanganyika. His guide Manua describes it to him.
Ooh,
I asked Manua if he had ever
interesting on
seen any
that
country
one.
resembling it. His reply was, "This country reminds me of what I saw in the country to the south of the Lake Tanganyika, when traveling with an Arab's caravan from Unjayembe. There is a river there called Kayoma, running into the lake, the sides of which are similar in precipitousness to the rocks before us." I then asked, "Do the people cross this river in boats?" "No, they have no boats, and even if they had, the people could not land as the sides are too
Her
steep.
voices aren't as bad
They
as the
pass
other one. I
underneath
just
the
wish they
river
would
by a
read the
natural
text, though.
tunnel or subway. He and all his party went through it on their way to Luemba, to Urungu, and returned by it. He described its length as having taken them from sunrise till noon to pass
13
through
Persian
it,
families.
and so high that
So
if
Justin
mounted upon
Trudeau
camels,
is
they could not
Persian.
touch the top.
Interesting.
Tall reeds the thickness of a walking stick grew inside. The road was strewed with white pebbles, and so wide, 400 yards, that they could see their way tolerably well while passing through it. The rocks looked as if they had been planed by artificial means. Water never came through from the river overhead. It was procured by digging wells. Manua added that the people of Wambe take shelter in this tunnel, and live there with their families and cattle, when molested by the Watuta, a warlike race descended from the Zulu
Warlike
Kaffirs.
race. Yeah.
But it is interesting to
Racism.
find in this book of
Yeah.
Votan,
The book has
however
racism
little
in it,
reliance we
definitely.
may place in its dates or details, evidence that there was actual intercourse between the Old World
Who
and the
said
New
that,
in
Autumn
remote
Fire?
ages.
Trump is traced
Humboldt
Muhammad.
remarks,
That's insane.
"We have fixed the special attention of our readers upon this
No way
Votan,
he wins.
or
Canadians hate
Woden,
him.
an
At least I
American who
hope.
appears of the same family with the Wads or Odins
Good
of the
Lord, you're
Goths,
huge.
and of the people of Celtic origin.
Dr. Strange Doom
Since, according
is
to the
the
learned
Nephilim.
researches of Sir William
Confirmed.
Jones, Odin and Buddha are probably the same person. It is curious to see the names of Bonvar, Woden's dead."
Did everyone else just hear what I just heard? Did he just... Odin and Buddha. Odin and Buddha are probably the same person. We have fixed the special attention of our readers upon this Wotan or Wodan, an American who appears... I can't follow this text. Odin and Buddha are probably the same person? What?
Day and Wotan, designating in India, Scandinavia, and in Mexico
Yeah,
the day of a
Odin
brief
is
period.
way older.
Views de Cordilleras, page 148,
Doesn't
edition
Buddhism
1810.
come out of
There are many
Hinduism?
things to connect the mythology of the Gothic nations with Atlantis. They had, as we have seen, flood legends. Their gods
I don't have
Croto
this
and
part in the
Satyr were the
text here.
Cronus and Saturn of Atlantis. Their Baal was the Bel of the Phoenicians, who were closely connected with
That
Poseidon
sounds
and
like Baal
Atlas.
to me.
And as we shall see hereafter, their language has a distinct relationship with the tongues of the Arabians, Cushites, Chaldeans, and Phoenicians. End of chapter 4 of part.
Okay. We're going to have to stop it here because in 40 minutes, so please come back, I'm going to be going live with debunking. Odin and Buddha are Scythian. Yeah, so the Hindu religion, the Vedic stuff, if I'm correct, would have come out of the Indo-European, Indo-Aryan, whatever you want to call them, Yamnaya. They're rooted in that tradition, so that makes sense. So yeah, ball. I'm gonna read the comments. You'll be back. Thank you. Yeah. So 40 minutes live with debunking. I'm gonna take a little break here. I'm gonna read the rest of the comments. So hang out if you want to. You just got a QP right now of Mike Tyson. What do you mean? A QP? Like weed QP, like quarter pound of Mike Tyson? They called the weed Mike Tyson. Is that what you're saying? Indra's grave has likely been found in the Yamnaya homeland. Yamnaya homeland is Central Asia, Uralic Mountains. Is that where the Yamnaya homeland is, or is it like farther east? I thought Odin was likely from the story of Wadon Lithi, who was trading in the Americas for... I don't know. Everyone knows the handbag are ball sacks. That reminds me of they confirmed. I posted about this on Twitter, but Herodotus once claimed that that the what are their names? The Scythians. Herodotus once claimed that the Scythians made leather out of human skin, and there were some remnants of leather quivers found, which the archaeologist tested them, and they were human skin. Pretty grisly people. Scythians probably pretty similar to the Assyrians and the Aztecs in that they were extraordinarily warlike compared to other people. Yeah, here are dedunkings. Yeah, it's going to be here. Debunking will be on this channel in 40 minutes. That stream will be up. Odin is Arab. Look at Nabatean script and Nordic script. Okay. Didn't the Polynesians' languages share strong connections to Greek? I don't think so, but I don't know that much about their language. No, it's on this channel. Advanced Atlantean kings had access to life-lengthening tech. That would be what the myths say, I think. All gods are same and only God, simply different cultural interpretations. Call them what you want, still God. I don't think Odin was a specific IRL dude, guys. I probably agree with you on that one. Scandinavian Indo-Europeans don't really show up until 1500 BC. Maybe a recent religion compared to most. I don't know. I think that's probably true. I'm not blowing smoke about Fidel and Trudeau. No, I mean I wasn't joking either. I think that's a thing. I think it's at least possible. I'd like to see his genetic tests. He looks a lot like him, guys. He really does. The Caucasus, I think they migrated into the Caucasus, but I think they came from Ural originally. Maybe Odin was the same guy and he started in a navy, a merchant captain. I don't know. Odin was a pirate. Okay, multiple people are saying this. What was my MOS in the Corps? I was in 1161 utilities, reefer mech, refrigeration mechanic, HVAC technician. Not kidding. That is what I did. I've gone into detail with that before. Basically, it's like I worked on like it's not like it's stuff. It's like cooling systems for like medical tents and big refrigerators for dead bodies and stuff. Medical tents and communications tents, that type of stuff. I ended up doing a lot of administrative things in a mechanics platoon, just because solid state devices don't break very much. HVAC stuff just doesn't really break. So they didn't really need us to do a lot. They don't really break. Hanging out in the hotel, fantastic. 30 minutes. Okay, CPO first class. I deployed on the USS Kearsarge 5th Fleet. Reefer mech. Are you familiar with the term reefer mech, or are you just saying that the name sounds cool? Yeah, that's what we called ourselves, reefer mechs. The actual official name is basic refrigeration and air conditioning technician. That was my MOS. And then my secondary MOS was which I ended up doing. That was my primary MOS after a while. MOS, for those that you don't know, is like your military specialty in the American Armed Forces. And my I'm trying to remember the number. It was like 90 something. I was a hazardous materials site manager after that. I worked on hazardous materials stuff, which was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that job quite a bit. I was like, I was a corporal, so the lowest form of NCO, and I was the ECO, the environmental compliance officer, assistant ECO, but the actual one, he didn't do the job. And like, he was a gunnery sergeant in E7. I was an E4 at the time, and I did that job. So I would like the people I dealt with. It was great because like a lot of the times you're the lowest form of NCO. You're still kind of in the shit with everybody. But I was kind of on my own doing my own thing, talking to officers and staff NCOs all the time. So I was, I just did my job and I didn't get bothered as long as I did my job, which I did. So that was great. Yeah, hazardous materials site manager was my secondary. Oh, yeah, it's literally dope. Right, reefer. Yeah, we made jokes about that as well. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, and I deployed Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I deployed around Portsmouth, Virginia, not in Portsmouth, but around Portsmouth. I forget what the base was called, but it was around there. That's what I did. All right. I'm going to cut this off. 35 minutes. We'll be back on this channel, not this stream, but on this channel. Please like the video if you haven't. Subscribe if you're not. D. Duncan will be on. We're going to talk about a number of things, the Graham Hancock episode, some stuff like that. Thanks so much for coming, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Nephilim Death Squad, that episode will be up soon on the Patreon. $2 below, $2 a month right now. You'll get freaking grandfathered in if you get it before I move it up, and I don't know when I'm going to move it up.